Cheaters confess. The shocking truth behind why some people cheat instead of just walking away. Oh man, this question was posted on the 14th of February. Tough Valentine's Day, huh? I did it because I was a crappy person and immature. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. I wasn't ready for a serious relationship and I was settling for someone I wasn't fully attracted to physically or mentally. This is me trying to be as honest as possible. I don't have an excuse. I was an awful partner. I wish my current wife, divorcing her now, would have that level of self-awareness. She cheated on me with someone at her work and kept telling me for 2 months how she needs her space because her therapist told her, and left every weekend. Then I learned she spent every weekend with her new boyfriend, all while I was genuinely caring for her well-being and helping her move to a new place. It was a shock for me because I thought our relationship was very happy. I think your description well describes her too. Immature, but also extra selfish, and using me in the end, I guess. It'll take me some time to overcome, and hopefully I get a true partner one day. Because I could. I was very selfish and wasn't thinking about the other person. I was in a happy relationship and was very fulfilled in the bedroom and otherwise. I was working as a doorman for a popular bar and was always approached by young, attractive women, and at the time I'd thought that no one would get hurt if nothing was found out. I was selfish and immature, and I didn't realize how much it would hurt myself to betray my own morals in such a way, let alone the hurt I'd cause the other person when they found out about my indiscretions. I was also struggling with my self-image and self-love and self-respect, all of which led me to be constantly seeking more and more validation from attractive women instead of trying to find reasons to be proud of myself. Biggest mistake of my life, and I would never do it again. Thank you for posting this. I recently discovered that I was being cheated on, and my ex gave me nothing in the way of accountability or even acknowledgement after I discovered it. No contact for a week now, and I've been in a lot of pain. I know it's pointless to search for answers on my own, but it's also helpful to read these responses from people willing to be honest, mature, and vulnerable about their mistakes. I had an emotional affair. My now ex was fond of mistreating his family. That's not me justifying it, just explaining it. And I used it as an escape fantasy. The person I used as a fantasy was kind to me and my daughter, and that's all it took. I finally left my ex when some friends gave my daughter and I a way out and a safe place to land, and my emotional obsession ended pretty quickly after that. Pretty diverse range of answers so far, and as crappy as it is that some of it happened, I do love me some accountability, and I don't think any of us would begrudge the last person given their situation. Dangerous to cheat on someone mistreating you, but the longing is understandable. My ex-wife cheated. We co-parent pretty well now, 10 years later. But how it's been described to me? She knew she didn't want to be married anymore, didn't want to deal with the embarrassment of telling me and our family, she just wanted to end it. I don't know what her game plan was or how long she would have kept it up if she didn't get caught, but overall I'd say she felt trapped and embarrassed. The marriage wasn't working and we were both better off after a divorce, but I definitely wish she'd told me and then moved on. It took me much longer to get over it because of the cheating, and I still have trust issues. She's married to the guy she cheated with. I've had a few relationships, but typically end things before they can get too serious. What stands out here is how much embarrassment drives bad decisions. Ending a marriage feels like a public failure to some people, so they choose private damage instead. Lying was easier. I wasn't sure how to leave or if I wanted to leave at first. I feel like this is one of the more actual answers other than I had no self-control. It's like testing the waters, but the waters is a new drink. I don't know. I always feel just the secrecy plays a big role psychologically, whether we know it or not, along with whatever the main reason is. Hypermanic hypersexuality. It destroyed me because I never thought I was capable, but all of a sudden I was buying $3,000 laptops and railing everything with legs, even putting my job at risk to do so. It's the kind of admission that will get you downvoted even in the bipolar community because people don't like what it implies. Funnily enough, I've been treated with medication and therapy for a decade and have had 0 recurrences, because I never actually wanted to be like that. Together 9 years, married 4, had a daughter together, and she was my life and joy. My wife cheated when my daughter was 2, while going through postpartum depression. Up until the depression, our relationship was awesome, loving and great bedroom times, and we were happy. Things got really bad. I fought for our marriage and found out she'd been sleeping with a coworker and became a really hateful person towards me. I've never loved any woman like I loved my wife, and that just devastated me. I did consider leaving, but her mum and dad asked me to give her time to work through her depression, and I couldn't be away from my daughter. I don't think her parents knew she was cheating. I met a woman through work a year later who was interested in me, but I wasn't looking for that. She backed off when I told her I was married, but we stayed friends. I continued to struggle with working out my relationship with my wife, and me and this woman eventually crossed that platonic boundary. At that point, I felt I owed it to myself to think about my happiness for a change. It was really hard to even think about sleeping with someone who wasn't my wife, but I made myself go through with it to create some emotional separation from her. My affair was with an older woman, divorced, very attractive, and wasn't looking for anything serious after getting out of years in a terrible bullying marriage. It was surreal the first time, but it became easier and it went on for about 6 months before I ended it. It might sound messed up, but I genuinely think it was a good decision for me. Eventually, my wife and I went to marriage counseling and we talked all of this out. It was good for her to learn about my affair as well because she stopped taking me for granted, and for the first time it occurred to her that she could lose me. We worked through it and eventually got back to happiness and had 2 more kids, and we've been married 33 years now. I've never cheated, but the phrase, "don't step out of your own canoe until you're firmly in another," seems to apply to most of these situations. I don't know if it was full-on cheating, but I called it Tarzaning when I found out my ex always had someone else lined up before she moved on, because you can't let go of one vine before you've got another to hang on to. Because I was selfish, immature, and had a bucket load of issues I hadn't worked on. They might not have been my fault, but they're definitely my responsibility. I have not and would not ever cheat again. I've done over 7 years of therapy. Honestly, it had barely anything to do with my partner or the marriage. Sure, he had his moments, but overall he was a great husband, friend, and father. The problem wasn't not loving him, it was not loving me. Once I got a taste of the validation of being adored, people saying, "You're so beautiful, so smart, so hot, so amazing," I was hooked. It was like an addiction I knew I needed to quit, but just couldn't quite get over. Could have been substances or booze that ruined my marriage. I'm sober now, and honestly, I'll never go there again now that I know what kind of devastation it can cause. Oof, I was getting worried about not seeing my answer up here. I was so neglected as a kid or teenager that when I started getting attention, it was like an addiction. My ex-wife was perfect, and anyone would be lucky to have her. But she couldn't fulfill the need that I had to be adored by multiple people. In the end, it took not trusting myself first, keeping my distance away from any situation that could even sniff like it could turn sour. Once I removed myself from those situations long enough, I had perspective to see how bad it was. It mimicked my recovery from addiction in a way that I'm only just now realizing as I type this. Misplaced feelings. I wanted love and physical touch. My partner had checked out of that 12 months prior. I'd spoken to her many times about why and if there was anything I could do. The conversations always led to nothing. I should have taken the initiative and ended it there as unrequited. Instead, I stuck it out, whatever it was by then, essentially sharing a rent bill. Eventually, someone showed an interest in me outside of my relationship, and I put those feelings towards that person instead. Honestly, it felt great initially to actually have someone that showed interest and wanted me physically. But the guilt ate at me pretty quickly, and within a few months I had to end everything. Stopped the affair and ended the relationship and did a whole clean slate on a fair few bits of my life. From my experience, affairs don't just happen accidentally. They're led by something. In hindsight, I was incredibly unhappy for years. An affair wasn't the solution, but it was a little bit of happiness in an otherwise very lonely time in my life. Yeah, there are some points where I guess a lot of people who do this realize that they just shouldn't have been in that relationship in the first place. Which doesn't make the solution they choose okay, it should be a cautionary tale. Even if your partner isn't treating you fantastically, you should give them a reality check by leaving or talking about leaving before you go testing the waters like this. It's easier said than done, I know. Although maybe the next story provides insight into how even that doesn't work sometimes. Spun out on substances after I tried to leave 10 times, and she'd throw a fit when I would, and I'd get guilt-tripped into staying with her. Eventually, one bad decision led to another and I acted on my drunk urges. Karma came for me harder than I could imagine. The next girl gambled thousands behind my back while we were $30,000 in debt, filed a restraining order with false allegations of animal mistreatment as soon as I began a payment plan, stole the house and dog that we had that I'd paid for, started doing her boss, and came back to me pregnant. I did, of course, say no. I didn't know I was cheated on until after my marriage ended for other reasons. In fact, I got told directly my husband was cheating by our shared primary care provider, and I still didn't believe it. When I talked to a family member about it, he admitted he had, at least in the past, been a serial cheater himself and been the backdoor lover for several married women. He said for him, and it seemed to him from some women, that cheating created a reason for the girlfriend or wife to break up with him so he wouldn't have to feel like the bad guy for breaking up with them. Twisted logic. I do think that's likely what happened with my ex-husband too, though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I think it was a way out. They cheated earlier, and there was a lot of pressure to forgive and move on. I was young and didn't have the support system, skills, or perspective to verbalize that I was a young woman being treated quite poorly. It was a bridge out, but to an identical situation. The person I cheated with cheated on me and left for that person. He cheated on her shortly before their wedding and called it off. Very expensive end to a marriage. Yep, and it's even more expensive to end a 20-plus year marriage. If things aren't going well within 3 years, cut your losses fast. I genuinely loved the girl that I was with and enjoyed spoiling her. The problem was that I loved myself more and that I was a selfish man with a lot of personal issues. My cheating had nothing at all to do with her and had everything to do with me being a terrible human being. I modeled the behavior I observed in my own parents growing up. I didn't accept that I could be in a happy and healthy relationship. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret my actions, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't miss my ex-fiancé. I feel like the rest of my life was cursed by my decision to cheat. I'm still working on getting my self-image back. I don't see myself as anything but disgusting now. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Never had an affair, meaning that I've never cheated for you pedantic folks. I never would, but I've been the person they were having an affair with, and they didn't leave either because their partner was great in other ways or because the activation energy to leave is so high. You get used to what you're used to. Even if a relationship is bad, people stay in them because it takes no energy to just stay with the status quo. Leaving someone and starting over is a big change. It's better in their mind to just occasionally get effed on the side. How does one become the side person several times for different people? Is that something you actively look for? Is it the lack of emotional attachment? I'm just going to point out that if you're dating in your late 30s, especially in a large city like New York, a lot of the men available are looking for an affair. You have to be really good at sorting them out. I don't think that people in long-term relationships since their mid-20s realize how easy it is to accidentally have an affair or two. Many probably cheat instead of leaving for financial reasons and don't want to ruin the life they built or the relationships they made. Yep, I was the affair, and no, I didn't know. The answer was ease and money. He was at the tail end of a PhD and she was subsidizing his life expenses. Socially, it was likely easier as well. Because the Dow was below 50,000. Because I was a selfish jerk, alright? Drunk and high. But truthfully, I just wanted it all. The things my partner was lacking, I looked elsewhere for. But really, I was looking for what I was lacking to be erased by feeling good from someone else. Total jerkwad. I would never set out to cheat. It would just happen. Once a girl wanted something, I was always afraid to say no. I told myself it was from some stuff that happened when I was younger, but still, that doesn't give anyone the right to play with hearts. So in the end, it's just because I was basically a piece of crap. Because we were unhappy, and cheating was an easier pathway to leave. My divorce lawyer, when I said to him I was guilty and wanted to be overgenerous, said, "Happy people don't end marriages." Yeah, and cheating is an easier pathway to leave. People don't throw out their only pair of shoes. It's going to be a very, very rare couple who separate while at least one of them doesn't already have another fish on the line. Too afraid and immature to be alone. Sought validation through relationship. Dead bedroom life, and despite all efforts, didn't improve. But I loved her and didn't want to leave her, but refused to spend the rest of my life in an asexual relationship. I'm sure a lot of the people on the internet won't like me saying this, but listen, a lot of you haven't been in relationships that span decades and have no idea what it's like. This place doesn't understand shades of grey, and I don't expect anyone to understand why I did it. Fear. I was scared of being alone and too cowardly to end things properly. I'm not proud of it. 13 years ago, I was deeply unhappy with myself and addicted to attention from beautiful women. I didn't have the strength to break up with my ex at the time. Instead, I cheated and then broke up with her the morning after. I'm ashamed I did it. It was stupid. I was stupid. I can answer your question from an analytical perspective. I think sometimes when the routine of life overwhelms two people, life seems monotonous and boring, and some people like to relive the feeling of a first meeting, a first glance, a first love, so they enter a vicious cycle. Between a temporary existence and keeping an older partner, confusion and deviation from the norm begin, and things develop, and that feeling of betrayal starts again. That's why they say, he who cheats once can cheat again. See, this fascinates me because I read a lot of romance books, so I personally feel like I can relive those first glances, first love feelings every time I pick up a new book, without it affecting my marriage whatsoever. Maybe more people need to read romance novels or watch some rom-coms. I feel like that would create a longing to experience some of the feelings you are reading or watching in person. But then again, a lot of the people I know who are really into romance novels don't seem inclined to go out and meet actual humans or even try the apps, so maybe there is something to this. We'd been together for 13 years and had a almost 3-year-old. He refused to acknowledge my presence for 6 months, other than to complain I wasn't doing enough or ask me to take him to work. He was employed full-time, but had a suspended driver's license. I couldn't pick up and cook the way he wanted because I spent all of my pre-work hours taking him to work, caring for the toddler, picking him up from work, and then going to work myself from 2 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. I'd get home at 10 p.m., have to cook him dinner because he spent the night putting our son down, in his words, and couldn't cook himself dinner, even though our son had a 7 p.m. bedtime. This is all the last 2 years of the relationship, by the way. In spite of all of this, I'd still try to be physically intimate with him regularly, and every time was shot down for nearly a year. On a rare night out, I went to a girlfriend's house for game night. Her husband's cousin was there, and it was like what happens in movies. It felt like a whole universe stopped, and it was just the two of us. I'm such a cynical person that I still get grossed out at how cheesy the whole thing felt. But it was instantaneous. I knew that this was who I was meant to be with. It wasn't because I was ignored by my son's father. It wasn't because I was emotionally and verbally and mentally mistreated to the point of wanting to self-delete. It was because the man I'd just met was my literal soulmate. I had an emotional affair for about a month before I actually did the deed with this man. He knew my situation. He didn't push for anything physical until I was ready. He knew that I was beating myself up for even entertaining the idea of breaking up with my family. But once we went there, past the point of turning back, it made the decision for me. I left my ex the next day. I told him everything. He spent the next 6 months trying to win me back. He said all of the right things, with zero follow-through, as I knew would be the case. I'm now married to the man I met through my friend. He still makes my heart race and my stomach flip. He's literally obsessed with everything about me and isn't afraid to show it. We have a 4-month-old son. He's a great stepfather to my eldest. They're besties. My ex and I co-parent so well, our son's teachers didn't realize we weren't together until we showed up to a school event with our actual partners. I cheated because I was ready to self-delete, and I wanted to be selfish for the first time in over a decade. Postpartum depression, anxiety, rage, and psychosis can affect a mother for years after the fact, especially if there's no treatment or support system. And I don't regret cheating, as I'm 100% certain I wouldn't be alive if I'd stayed with my ex. I just wish that I hadn't needed to. You spend 13 years with someone you intend to spend your life with, having a baby with a man whose red flags I'd been ignoring for nearly a decade, plus a global pandemic shutting down the world 3 weeks after giving birth. I think that I was set up to fail. I don't believe the saying, once a cheater, always a cheater, anymore because of my experience. I'll never cheat on the man that I call my husband. I still can't believe he's mine, and I'm grateful every day for him. Also, to clarify but not justify, I found out about a year after I left him that he cheated on me the first 2 years we were together, and he'd actually been cheating on me since our son was born, claiming his work said he was an essential worker. And then whoever he was sleeping with would pick him up after I'd drop him off, and then drop him back off before I'd pick him up. So do what you will with that information. I was a teenager and I was terrified of abandonment. I knew that if I broke up with the person, they wouldn't be in my life anymore, or at least not in the same capacity. I couldn't deal with that at the time, so I'd be with them, but because I also sucked horribly at communication, I couldn't tell them the things they were doing wrong or not doing that I needed them to do. So I'd go and find that in someone else. When I finally got the stones to end the relationship, it just all happened in the next one again. And sometimes I'd go back to people I broke up with prior, just a toxic time all around. It wasn't until I met my husband that I finally broke the cycle and figured my crap out. And yes, he knows about it all and he trusts me. There's really no excuse. I can say that I did what I did because of my horrible childhood trauma or blah blah blah, but even still, I'm not proud of what I did and I don't condone cheating at all. If you're not happy in a relationship, you should just end it. If you can't deal with the embarrassment, hurt, or whatever, figure it out and end it.
Parents of Reddit, what's the most absurd thing you found on your kid's social media? Not technically a parent, but an older sister. My little brother, when he was around 7-ish, had a search history of naked women and such. And when my mother found out and confronted him, he cried and was saying he just wanted to be like Jack from the Titanic by drawing naked women. And he had a few pages of his attempted drawings. Hey, maybe the kid's found his calling in art. We don't know. Was at my friend's place at around the age of 10 to 12 when my parent called me home randomly. I run in the front door and both my parents are sitting in the living room and immediately ask me to spell the word sex. I do, and then they tell me to send my brother over. My brother runs over and he'd be around 9 or 10 and doesn't come back. Turns out he searched for girls having sex but spelt it 6. These parents are over here trying to identify the digital handwriting. I found my stepdaughter's Musical.ly account. She had a bunch of poor attempts at sexy belly dancing to various Evanescence songs. She joined one of those Facebook groups. It was called Anything's an Adult Toy If You're Brave Enough. Pictures of my daughter, 11, posing quite harmlessly that went on to bum shots and short shorts. Someone pretending to be a 14-year-old girl asked her to do these shots for a modeling competition, and sent similar shots so she knew how to pose. She eventually stopped the conversation. The pics came through my iPad since the devices were linked. The police got involved and also CEOP. They originated from an account in South Africa, so Interpol took over the case and will probably never get an update. Instagram never even bothered to respond to my report. This happened to the 12-year-old daughter of a friend of mine recently. She also happened to cross it in much the same way and reported it to the police. They ended up having a huge investigation involved with the FBI, and the guy has now been sentenced to jail. My friend's daughter was one of the dozens he'd been soliciting. Keep an eye on your kids' social media, guys. You never know who's trying to contact them. I had a coworker bring her kid in during the summer so that she could run him to the local middle school for football practice when she took her break at 9. Since I was in training at the time, I was sitting with her at her desk and mine was not in use. To keep him occupied, I'd log into my computer and then she'd pull up YouTube so we could watch the Watch Me Whip song, because apparently kids will watch that for hours. Well, one day she goes over to check in on him and says in a confused voice, "Who the heck is Ed Gein?" So it turned out that it was still logged into my YouTube profile, where I had taken to watching documentaries about serial killers, and the kid had clicked on one of the recommended videos. Whoopsies. If she's really worried about what her kid's watching, then she should just create her own YouTube account. Personally, I have childlike parents. Weirdest thing so far was having to sit down and have a talk with my mother about how some things on Facebook are not real. My extended family lives in Houston, and during Hurricane Harvey, my mother was driving my elderly relatives to hysteria by emailing them horribly photoshopped pictures of Houston landmarks submerged under 50 feet of water, followed by, "It's a biblical flood! The world is ending! The news is lying to you! You're gonna die if you don't get in your car and drive out of town right now!" I talked to my stepdad and made him give me her password so I can shut down her account during the next natural disaster. Probably doing everyone in your family a favor. When I was 9 or 10, my buddy and I were on the family computer doing whatever 9 or 10-year-olds do. My friend told me to go to prettygirls.com. Seemed innocent enough, except it directed us to an adult site, and we immediately panicked and closed the browser. My mom really chewed us out when she found out. I tried to tell her we were just looking for pretty girls, but she wasn't having it. It was a long few weeks of computerless punishment. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to bet it's something I disapprove of. My 15-year-old happily announces that he went viral because his comment amassed 1.5k likes on Reddit. "Well, what did you ask?" I asked him. "I forgot." "What's your Reddit name?" "I can't tell you." "Then why did you mention it?" With that comment having 3.5k likes itself, I'd like to think that the son saw it and got pretty jealous. That my 12-year-old son searched for pro study tips. No joke. My son, trying to study harder. Never in a million years and lives would I have expected this. When my twins were young, in elementary school, they were looking up The Simpsons and accidentally came across some adult Simpsons content. The computer was in the living room, so I heard them giggling and turned to see two guilty little faces. It was so hard not to laugh and so disturbing. What a conversation. The sight of Milhouse and Lisa is forever burned into my retinas. Looks like everything's coming up, Milhouse. When he was little, my brother once wanted to help us find a cool new purse to order for my mom's birthday. He did an image search for fun bags, and my parents had to answer a lot of questions. Not a parent, but my cousin one time got onto the computer when he was 11 or 12 or so and tried searching for indecent pictures of girls his own age. I was there when his stepdad checked through the browser history, and needless to say, he and my cousin had a chat about acceptable search terms. Yeah, that could have gotten really bad. They might be on a list now. Not social media, but I once caught both of my nieces playing an animated game online where the objective was to spank a cartoon butt with a paddle. Every time they'd swing the paddle at the butt, it would emit the sound of a woman moaning. They couldn't understand why the game was inappropriate, and were laughing hysterically while playing. Not a parent, but some of my students, 7th and 8th grade, asked to add me on Instagram. The worst username I've come across is BootyWarrior13. To be clear, I don't ever add anyone and my account is private. I never give them my handle because I don't want them to find me, but if they do, I decline the follow anyway. Usually the way I find out about their Instagram names is because they'll oftentimes want their peers to follow them, and they'll promote themselves by putting their username or handle on the board. I often joke though that I would add them on Facebook, to which I always get the reply, "Facebook is for old people," so that's fun. When I was 12, my dad found adult Dragon Ball Z content in my search history and proceeded to look through all of the pages while I hid in the bathroom pretending to take a poop. I remember him yelling my name and having to mentally prepare to deny everything. I'm scared to death to have kids and find their adult content searches. My girls are 8 and 10, and so far we've seen sucking boobies and Scooby-Doo sex. It's great. Parenting is great. Send help. Not my kid, but on Halloween I saw a post on my 17-year-old cousin's Snapchat that was a selfie caption verbatim, "Any girls trying to come over here and suck on this spooky thing and get festive with some pumpkin spice lattes?" I immediately facepalmed, then laughed my butt off for a solid 15 minutes. A friend from work's son goes to a fairly strict Catholic school. One day, I was walking out to my car and she was outside yelling on the phone and generally freaking out. I waited around. She usually has a lot of funny drama going on. She hangs up the phone, looks at me, starts hyperventilating, and then laughs hysterically. I was like, "Girl, what is going on?" She said her son's principal called her and her husband and that they need to come to the school immediately, that her son will fill her in on the rest. She continues to tell me that her son got caught looking at naked ladies on the internet, and the principal printed out his search history. He searched booby prawn and lady parts during class. She was yelling at her husband on the phone, telling him about the situation, and all he had to say was, "We should have taught him how to delete the history." I mean, the husband has the kid's best interests at heart, let's be honest here. When I was a little girl, I wanted to play some Barbie games or look at girl stuff, so I went to girls.com. Went downstairs to my mom crying in order to rat myself out. My little sister had something similar happen. She wanted to look at new bikes in order to decide what to ask Santa for. She went to dicks.com, hoping to see Dick's Sporting Goods. Instead, she saw a lot of schlong. Guess it runs in the family. Funny thing is, dicks.com actually takes you to Dick's Sporting Goods homepage now. Oh dear God. Reading this makes me realize how much my parents probably saw in my search history before I knew about incognito mode. Okay, it should be my parents telling this story, but here goes. So when I was a youngin' and just exploring the internet, I would usually go on Disney Channel to play games, but I wanted to find sites with fun girly stuff on them. So of course I just went to girls.com. Well, that took me right to an adult site, and my little self was like, whoops, and closed it right away. Well, apparently my dad had been looking at the browser history and noticed. So my dad's interrogating my two older brothers, asking them who was looking at adult content, and of course they said it wasn't them. My dad was persistent with trying to get them to confess until I come down the stairs and confessed that it was me. My brothers had the biggest sigh of relief. You're a good sister. I know many a sister who would have counted that as a double win. Number 1 for not getting caught, and number 2 for getting your brothers in trouble. I found out my son is an urban explorer. He's 14 and I saw some of the videos of him and his friends sneaking into an old Air Force base and climbing on top of an air hangar. Yeah, just make sure he doesn't do anything really dangerous. One of my buddies was an urban explorer and I honestly don't know how he's not dead. He's climbed the top of spherical shaped buildings, hopped on fast moving trains and other crazy stuff. This is another trend that I just find incredibly dangerous and stupid. Guys, please don't do stuff like this. It's not worth it just for some views. I was trying to figure out my niece's age, but it was too late to call my mom and ask. I remembered she had an Instagram account and I thought that might help me figure out how old she is. I looked her up. She has the standard tween Insta bio about what activities she likes and a list of 15 of her BFFs. Immediately followed by pondering, and I quote, "Mostly, why do people hate me?" She's 12. She's definitely 12. In my 9-year-old son's Google history, I found, "Do girls in England poo blood for a month? Do you live in England? Because it's weirder if you don't." My 15-year-old dropping acid on Snapchat. So, not just bad choices, but we're raising a kid stupid enough that not only created video evidence, which was beyond dumb, but to keep it under my story. I checked my 11-year-old son's search history to find a number of interesting questions. Do men grow vaginas? Will my penis disappear when I'm 18? Will I become a girl? How do I save my penis? I asked him about his search history a couple days later, and he told me that some kids in school told him that when boys turn 18, they turn into girls and lose their penis. Those bastards. I hopped on my nephew's tablet and proceeded to pull up the internet browser. Immediately I was staring at a screenshot of an overweight, homeless-looking Santa knocking the cornhole out of a much younger Mrs. Claus. I immediately asked my nephew what kind of research he was doing with this Santa video, and his face turned fire engine red and he scurried back to his room. I'm sure he at least appreciates your discretion. This is kinda close. So I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. They both love to watch kids' YouTube. Mostly these annoying toy unwrapping videos. I don't know. Anyhow, the other day I was working on my computer and they were playing Play-Doh. My 2-year-old comes into the room and tells my wife while I'm listening, "Mommy, I made this." My wife, "Oh, that's awesome." 2-year-old, "Do you like it? Let me know in the comments." My wife and I died. I think this might kind of say something about what we're exposing our kids to in this day and age, but we're not going to get into that right now. I recently discovered my 10-year-old son had been looking for inappropriate content, but his computer has parental controls, so he was trying to look it up on his Roblox game. My daughter was 6 at the time. She was supposed to be asleep and I go up to charge her Kindle and can't find it. I go to her room and quietly sneak in. I find her watching a video under a blanket. It's a popular mechanics video about how to build your own windmill. She had a mock model in the corner of the room she was working on. I definitely wasn't expecting that. This is definitely our most wholesome one so far. She's just enthusiastic about her project. My kids are too young for Twitter or Snapchat, but they love to watch YouTube. I started getting notifications a few months ago from people replying to my comments on conspiracy videos. I found out my son has a curiosity about flat earthers and doomsday preppers. That's kind of the scary side of everything. The kid doesn't know any better, he's just watching a video. And once you watch one, YouTube just starts to recommend more and more. They don't understand that the videos they're watching are conspiracy videos, and that the information in them might be less than accurate. When my son was 8, my wife was looking at his tablet and saw his comments on YouTube videos. Quite a few comments along the lines of, "You don't know what you're talking about, you," and then a series of randomly strung together cuss words that normally wouldn't be used together. He'd get called out by others for the random cussing and he'd say, "I'm only 8, I can do what I want," followed by random string of cuss words. When we brought it up, he knew they were bad words, but was repeating other vulgar comments he saw from other comment trolls, and didn't fully understand the harshness of his words. Now his YouTube habits are monitored much more closely, and he hasn't done anything like that since. Hopefully you got on top of that one early enough that he's not going to turn into another kid telling me how he's going to screw my girlfriend on Fortnite. My daughters are grown up now, but when one of them was around 14 or 15, I opened up her MySpace page. She was telling all these kids that her mother, that would be me, was a raging alcoholic. She was telling them how I was neglectful and how I didn't like her. At the time, I was pregnant with twins, working full-time, and my husband was gone with the Marines a lot. I'm not a drinker at all. Obviously, we had a long talk. She was feeling left out with all the excitement over the babies. Still though, it was pretty hurtful. It took me a long time to get over that. I wouldn't take that one too personally. Your daughter was just looking for some attention. It's honestly kind of understandable. My younger brother thought that when you entered more searches, it would delete the ones before at some point. So I look on his iPad one day and see a search for boobs or something like that. The search after that was cheese, then cheese, and then cheese, and so on. So many cheeses. Wouldn't you have to start at the top where it was just a whole bunch of cheeses and then see it be less and less cheeses as you go down? So you'd be scrolling down through all of the cheeses and then get to the bottom and see boobs and be like, I see what he was trying to do. My significant other was looking something up on YouTube at her sister's place, and the search bar autofill defaulted to sexy girls with nipples you can see through their tops, but spelt horribly. My significant other's niece is 6. Needless to say, her parents were mortified and doubled down on the parental controls. When Twitter became popular, my son was about 5 or 6 years old. He came up with a way to tweet vocally. Throughout the day, he would say things like, "Going to play with my trains, tweet tweet," and "bacon for breakfast, tweet tweet." I was sad when he stopped doing it. When I was 11, my mom asked me one day about some Google searches on the family computer, including sexy Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. I blamed it on the babysitter, and somehow convinced my brother to back me up. A couple years later, I was caught searching, "Can I see a picture of a girl in a bikini?" But I wasn't able to blame it on anyone this time around. I've since discovered the incognito tab. I think the incognito tab might be the secret hero behind this entire Reddit thread. My stepson is 7. I found a bunch of searches for Dominicans with no hands and feet, Dominicans with no heads, Dominican chests, Dominican torsos, Dominican legs, Dominicans in stores, Dominicans for sale, silver Dominicans, black Dominicans, white Dominicans. I was at a loss of how to bring it up to him. Thankfully, the next day we were in a clothing store and he asked me why Dominicans don't have hands or heads. Then why are there so many different colored Dominicans? I remembered the internet searches and became a little upset. I told him to be quiet because what he was saying could be taken offensively by Dominican people. He then got frustrated and loudly said, "Dominicans aren't people," as he pointed to a statue next to us. I breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Mannequins." I'm sure you still got a few looks in that store though. Not my kid, but my nephew. He was diligent upon receiving his phone to get Facebook installed along with an account. Last year, Halloween, I walked by him on his phone and glanced at a video of an explosion. Turns out, he liked a page of people blowing crap up. Not just any crap, but the actual crap that comes out of people. When confronted, he said he was shown the page from a friend who uploads videos there. You know, typically I would say your kid's gonna be friends with who he's gonna be friends with, but I think this is definitely one of those cases where you need to intervene. My son has autism, high functioning but still autistic. He's been mainstream for most of his schooling, and in 5th grade, one of the boys told the others how to search vagina and boobs on the computer. Well, my son in all of his autism glory was searching pugina, not vagina, and was only getting pictures of leaves. Poor kid. This was probably the early 2000s. Me and my buddy were off school for the summer and he would come hang out at my house. Occasionally, we'd look at adult content on the family computer. One day, my dad comes home from work and comes downstairs and says, "Hey, you guys missed the bus." I'm like, it's summer. There's no school. My dad responds, "The bang bus." Mother of God, we forgot to close the browser. I found a search for weight loss on my then 12-year-old search. Bothered the heck out of me as I've always tried to instill good body image, and she's by no means overweight. She was going through the baby fat stage. Started having conversations about the importance of being healthy and exercising, but to be comfortable with the body we have. She's since stretched out. But man, I looked for signs of starving and bulimia. Her mother was a bulimic, and I didn't want her to repeat that. We got my young daughter a tablet last Christmas. A couple days later, I went to look something up, and the search bar history had one entry. Is Santa Claus real? Well, that one kinda backfired, didn't it? What did your school waste money on that nobody liked? They made a huge screen with 4 plasma screens and put it in a very random place in a random building hall. All 4 just constantly said no signal and nothing else. Name tags. Shortly after Columbine and all those other shootings peaked in frequency, it was supposed to keep outsiders from getting in the school unnoticed and shooting everyone. But at the time, people doing the shootings were always students, so we joked that they were bulletproof. This does sound like one of those decisions that was made in response to something happening in current events, and maybe wasn't exactly thought through all the way. Some of my classmates won a bunch of money for our school. Our school was one of the lowest funded schools in the district. The district took the money and spent it on another school. Maybe that school needed it more or needed it for something really important, but yeah, either way, that doesn't seem fair on surface level. The large schoolyard at my school had a set of planters in the center. There were basically 4 triangles made of brick that pointed in at each other and created an X-shaped walkway between. The outside sides had a bench each attached. People would sit and chat to each other on the benches, teachers and students alike. There was very little litter or vandalism. The plants were kinda pretty insofar as any secondary schooler would care to notice. One year, a duck made her nest in one of the planters, and apart from a few "oh, hey, a duck nest" comments, it was left alone. Then, for some reason, the school decided to rip the planters out. Took them 2/3 of the school year to do it, and blocked off the X walkways so everyone had to crush by on the outside lanes between classes. Everyone was super curious as to what the planters would be replaced by. Turns out, nothing. They simply bricked over the holes left by the planters and left it as a huge empty space. We didn't even get new benches, so no one had anywhere to sit during break. People started to miss the plants since the lack of color left the whole area kinda bland. We also kept to the old X walkway since stepping over the former plants felt weirder. This seems like one of those times where it's just like, why? What was the issue? You spent a lot of time and money to just take something away that was nice? iPads for the kindergarten. They were intended to have educational apps on them that kids could play on at indoor recess. Believe it or not, most kindergartners would rather play on the swings or play with dolls than learn to write their name on an app. No one used them, no one liked them, and they all broke within 2 months. Yeah, that sounds like a waste of money if I ever heard one. I was on a boys' varsity soccer team in high school. The new head coach wanted to emphasize a more analytical approach, and as such had Booster Club buy a $10,000 goalpost camera. None of the team liked the idea anyway, especially since the girls' soccer team used their money for new jerseys and nicer balls, and they still made it farther in their playoffs than we did almost every year. As it turns out, the coach couldn't figure out how to put the camera together, and we never used it. Biggest waste of $10,000 I've ever seen. I'm sure there was a much cheaper option he probably could have gone for. Trash cans with the school logo on them and banners. They tried hyping us up about new trash cans on the morning show. At my school, they took away some of the tables in the cafeteria until we kept it cleaner. We just sat on the floor instead. When 65-inch TVs were like 4K a pop, they set about 8 of them around campus that just displayed the time. $4,000 clocks. Not to mention whatever they used as a video source to send to the display. This makes no sense to me that you would make an investment like this and then not make proper use of it. What is wrong with people? You can do so much more than just show the time. Be creative, come on. My high school purchased a vending machine that only contained Swerve. What is Swerve, you ask? Carbonated milk. Again, who's in charge of these ideas? A 3D printer that the teachers won't learn how to use, so now nobody's allowed to use it. My school got 4 of those, and the teacher responsible for them actually encouraged us to take the SolidWorks course to learn about 3D design. It was actually a lot of fun, and I still have some of the objects I created. Goes to show, a lot of the times it comes down to the person doing the teaching. They have to have some enthusiasm. A memorial tree was planted for a girl who was killed right before graduation by her family and friends. The school allowed it, and there was a beautiful Japanese maple tree there for like 10 years. Apparently they just cut it down and had no reason why. Everyone was pretty ticked off, especially the family. My son's current school sent out an email to parents announcing that they'd like to add voice projection to every class. He's in first grade and there are 20 kids in his class. Totally unnecessary. They had a demo session and it sounded horrible. My high school teacher got these midway through my junior year, and they sucked. The range wasn't great, and the receiver in one classroom would pick up the microphone in another, and the battery life was awful, so the teachers rarely used it. The best thing that they were used for was the one time that my teacher noticed a kid in the room across the hall was asleep in class. They were watching a video and the other teacher had stepped out of the room for a moment. They walked over to the door so that the other room's receiver would pick up his mic and said, "Wake up!" and then closed his door. This really does sound like a waste of money unless you specifically have a kid who has a hearing disability or something. And in that case, normally they have something that is individual to them that connects to their hearing aid and the teacher has a microphone so that they can hear them better. Not something that needs to be projected to the whole class. When I was still a student, my school spent almost $200,000 to paint the road outside our school. You read that right. Almost $200,000 of our precious tuition dollars to paint the roads outside blue and yellow. To pour salt on this painful wound, the paint job didn't even make it through winter. Just to reiterate, $200,000 for 3 months of painted road. I think I'm still angry about it. Who would hear that cost and decide, yeah, that sounds like a good investment? My high school wasted a ton of money buying 2 golf carts. Their reasoning was it allowed staff to get to any dangerous scenes faster. Except we never had any accidents and they were mostly used for joyrides by the hall monitors. You know what? This one I can kinda get behind. It's not some $200,000 expense and they got used and you had a little fun along the way. One of the schools in our district paid an astronomical fee to an artist to create artwork for the hall of the school. Paid for the dude's room and board for like a year, and he produced a large polished piece of wood. No, literally, that's it. It was supposed to be shaped like a heart, but looks more like a butt, and is now known as the Bart. I'm sorry, but sometimes I do think that modern art is just ridiculous and a ripoff. My school just spent tens of millions of dollars on a remodel that includes a new commons and front office area, which were not needed, but no new classrooms, which were desperately needed. The old commons was warm, inviting, bright, and beautiful. It wasn't old. The new commons is dark, cold, sterile, and uninviting. The exterior was changed too. The entire front of the school used to be attractive. Now it looks like a prison. I think maybe the architect presented the design as a joke, but our principal liked it, so the architect just rolled with it. It never fails that when a school gets some money, they spend it on the staff and not the students. They cut out welding, machine shop, wood shop, and graphic design to buy a $1 million scoreboard for football. Honestly, there's way too much value put onto sports. Everything that was listed sounds way more valuable to learn than to be able to look at a scoreboard. Our mascot was a rocket, and a certain percentage of school construction money had to be spent on art. They spent $90,000 commissioning a giant rocket sculpture for the main field entrance. When it was unveiled, the artist had made one tiny change to the design. Instead of a pointy rocket tip, he'd gone with a rounded, mushroom tip. I mean, we thought it was hilarious, especially when they cut off the tip as their solution to the problem. But nobody liked it. I'm sorry, did they circumcise the rocket? My school invested in 8-year-old Chromebooks that die in like 30 minutes. Again, not willing to invest in what the students actually need, and just going for the cheapest, crappiest thing they can find. I'm a teacher. My first year, the school leader bought a ping pong table for the lounge in an attempt to make the school more fun and relaxing. It simply became a surface to put copies on. You know what? This one sounds like it's more of a people around you situation. You guys could be having fun with it, but you're choosing not to. That's on you, not them. Besides, tables themselves can get pretty expensive. At least this one you can play with if you want. My son's elementary school PTO had an excess of funds. They decided to put it on a buddy bench. A buddy bench is a bench where you can sit on if you want a buddy. In theory, it sounded like a decent idea, except that it was placed in the hallway near the office and none of the kids wanted to be identified as someone who didn't have a friend. Nobody ever sits on it. I agree that the theory of the buddy bench is nice, but in practicality, it's probably not going to get used. This wasn't common knowledge, so I was the only one really ticked off by it, but I worked for Cisco Foods as a baker at a university, and the upper echelons of the administration had hired their own personal pastry chef to make these extravagant desserts for their meetings. This pastry chef was legit. She made absolutely amazing desserts of a wide variety every day, loaded them onto the cart, and with her baker's outfit and hat on, would wheel it up to their daily administration meetings. Her salary was paid for by the students of the school, so that the administrators could dine on first-class pastries and desserts made from scratch each day. She was really good at her job and actually helped me improve in the bakery. But I was so mad that her job even existed simply to provide pastries to people who just sat around and decided how the school's money was spent. I obviously didn't make a stink about it to anyone because she was my friend, and I would never dream of putting her employment at risk. But I couldn't help feeling like her entire career was to make fat cats fatter, and it just boiled my blood. Okay, this is the first story that has genuinely ticked me off in how money is being spent. Just random TVs in the hallway that showed slideshows and crap. Tens of thousands of dollars when we could have just put up bulletin boards. My school had loads of TVs that I don't recall ever seeing turned on. Seems like there might be a trend in the TV area here. They installed cameras in nearly every inch of the school, not for student safety, but because the school board didn't trust the kids. My school was miles behind other high schools. Old textbooks and sometimes not enough textbooks. Computers were junk, no in-school programs. They spent every ounce of money on cameras and putting the rest in the school board's pockets. I really feel like these places need to be more strongly audited for stuff like this. My high school spent a bunch of money on this system to play popular songs for the last minute of passing time between classes, so we'd hear popular music and as a convenient way to know to get to your next class. Then they started playing Friday by Rebecca Black every Friday. Once. Then it was the only song on Fridays. Then it was the only song. Every day, 5 times a day. Thank God that was my senior year. No idea if they still do it. My God, I hope not. I'm sure the kids would be rioting. My school's mascot was a knight, and it was rumored that the school had the choice of installing a pool at the high school or to commission a large 25-foot-long metal sculpture of a knight on a horse, and to hang it from the ceiling in the back hallway. They opted for the horse. My guess on this one is they didn't want the long-term maintenance cost of the pool. They bought flags of all the states and put them around this caged-in area full of gravel. They caged in the gravel to stop students from walking across the gravel. They also bought flags in the school's color to line the fence around campus. Only thing is, we were in an area which can get very windy with zero windshield, so those flags took a beating. By mid-year, they were an ugly frayed mess. My school spent $30,000 from 2 years of fundraising on an LED billboard about 10 feet off of a major road. It was so bright that it caused several accidents at night and had to be shut down about 8 months later because it was deemed a safety hazard. I hung out with several of the guys on the programming team and they figured out how to upload memes onto it. They couldn't figure out who did it, so no one got in trouble. In 2011, my college spent $32,000 to have Snooki come in as an inspirational speaker in some misguided attempt to connect with freshmen. Around the same time, there was a growing student-led movement to make the school more affordable. The student board revolted. People confronted her during her speech. It was a glorious mess. I think anyone who finds Snooki to be inspirational doesn't need to be encouraged. I went to a Catholic high school. Very few of the students were actually Catholic and went there because the local public school district was terrible. We won some contest or grant and the school said they would allow the students to pick what the money was spent on. The options were new flooring for the gym, renovate the courtyard next to the chapel into a prayer garden, or renovating the courtyard next to the cafeteria into an outdoor eating space. Most people voted for new gym floors, and some people voted for the outdoor eating space. I don't know of anyone who voted for the prayer garden. Guess what won? The prayer garden. People, even teachers, were furious, as the voting was clearly rigged to give us the appearance of a choice. If they really wanted a prayer garden, they should have just done the work without putting it to a vote. The funny thing about the prayer garden is that they actually made it nice and put in benches and plants and whatnot, but it was always locked and never used. Administration would often say during tours, "Oh, look at our lovely prayer garden for students. They voted for it. No, we didn't. Wait, the church used the money on themselves? No. i7 workstation laptops with Quadro GPUs, easily $2,500 each, for an elementary school, kindergarten through grade 6. Those machines were designed for CAD work and media production, but were instead solely used for web browsing and Microsoft Word. I don't have any idea why they bought them. Okay, so earlier we were talking about 8-year-old Chromebooks. This school has decided to go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. These are laptops that should be available to university students who are studying like 3D rendering and things like that. This really goes to show that the people who decide where the money goes don't have any idea what they're doing. Laminated ID cards that everyone had to wear around their necks on some dorky lanyard. No one did it, so they made it punishable by detention. After that, half the students still didn't do it, and the detention hall became so overwhelmed that they began to make backlogs. After a few weeks, not wearing it gave you a detention 2 months from then. Eventually, detention became so backlogged that students started doing more severe transgressions, because they would have graduated before they could actually be forced to go to detention. After about a month of this, no one had to wear their ID cards at all anymore. They said it was for security purposes so no one could sneak into the school. The thing is, you could literally put anything in the lanyard and no one would check if it was your actual student ID card. I had a blank index card in mine and no one ever said anything to me. If someone actually wanted to sneak into the school, all they would need is a lanyard and no one would ever check if it's actually authentic or not. Like, what's the point? You're gonna sit there and enforce detention that aggressively because you need to flex your power over the students, but you're not gonna enforce the actual safety aspect that you're trying to argue that it's there for in the first place? Guys, this thread's really getting to me. Our school paid to cover a huge lot with cement just to have a ceremony on it announcing a new building. Then they tore it up 2 months later to start construction. My school fees went towards having nice cement for press pictures. What a joke. My school wasted so much money on plastic ID cards that you were supposed to scan into every room to assure you were there, and the IDs were also keys to get into the buildings. If you didn't have your card, you couldn't get in, and also got in-school suspension. It wasn't a bad system because you could easily take a photo of your ID to scan into rooms, but you'd have to bum a buddy to get into a building. But once there were internet problems, the whole system would shut down, and living in a rural wheat town, you could expect wind and rain and tornadoes and all of that fun stuff. My college spent $2,000 on a conference table. It made national headlines. This just reminds me of that scene from Community. When I went to college, the local NFL team paid for the school to go from a grass field to artificial turf. The school never said it was only half paid for by the team. My siblings had a whole year without paper, printers, no raises for staffs, cutting school programs, and they slashed the art budget. The football team still got new uniforms that year though. How are you going to put so much value on your football team? Come on, give the rest of the students what they need. My town got a brand new middle school, and somehow they spent $40,000 on a giant metal palm tree that they called the Learning Tree. One of the chair people essentially commissioned it from a relative. So many of us were ticked off. It didn't even have lights, and there was no way to clean it, so it just sat there like the giant waste of money it was collecting dust. Well, we liked it at first, not so much after. I followed a product development study and we got a fancy industry-grade laser cutter in our workplace. Then after a couple of people were able to use it, the teacher decided it needed cleaning. She proceeded to use a toothpick to shove it into the nozzle where the laser comes out, damaging the mirror inside the machine. We had this thing for less than a week. 2 years later I graduated, and as far as I know, that thing is still broken. Those lasers are incredibly expensive and powerful. What do you think was stuck in there that you could get out with a toothpick that the laser couldn't get out itself? When I started secondary school, we had a canteen with proper home-style food being served. Cooked fresh, real meat and vegetables, and good portion sizes. All the students loved it, and it was well used. The school decided to replace this with a fast food-style setup with processed burgers and fries to try to appeal to the kids, and up the prices too. Within a month, nobody visited the canteen anymore. Practically every kid in the school started bringing food from home. It took 3 months till they changed everything back again. Massive expense for absolutely no reason. It was already very successful as it was. Why mess with a good thing? You just wanted to get cheaper food in there and charge more, didn't you? Teachers of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've had to send someone to the principal's office? Not entirely the principal's office because they were kindergartners, but two boys turned off the lights in the bathroom, had their pants around their ankles, chasing each other around in the dark and peeing on each other. That was a weird one to explain to the parents. I work at a daycare and we couldn't figure out why the bathroom smelled like pee so bad even though it gets cleaned twice a day. After a few days, one of the teachers was tying a boy's shoes when she looked into the bathroom and saw another boy peeing directly into the floor drain. Apparently half the class was peeing down the drain instead of into the toilet. Unfortunately enough for young kids, peeing is funny, and they tend to go places with that. A kid dropped a folder full of Xeroxed copies of his hairy butt. Turns out he'd been taping them to people's lockers all over school. Maybe someone told him he had a nice butt and he felt obliged to share it with the rest of the world. My dad worked as a teacher in a school for misguided youth. On the first day, he wrote his name on the board as new teachers do, and when he turned his back towards the class, a kid had lit his desk on fire with hairspray and was just laughing. 3-foot-high flame no more than a foot away from him. I had a 6th grader who was, just to paint the picture, a human incarnation of Ralph Wiggum, who wanted to get out of class so desperately that first he raised his hand and said his ears were ringing and he needed to go to the nurse. Sorry kid, not falling for it. 20 seconds later, he raised his hand and said his tongue was burning and needed to go to the nurse. Not falling for it, Ralph. 10 seconds later, he had blurry vision. He was squishing his eyes with his hands. No dice, kid. And then, in the grand finale, he stands with a flourish and yells so loud that teachers all down the hall stuck their heads out into the hallway. My tongue is bleeding! We all stood mouths agape until the one wise guy in the class adds, and you want the nurse to look at it? What did this kid have to get out of class so bad for that he felt the need to yell that to everybody? I didn't send him to the office, but one of my favorite moments was one time I was working with a small group while other students worked on independent stuff around the room. One student was working pretty close to me and obviously made a mistake because he exclaimed, crap, except he didn't say crap. So I said, excuse me, Ty, what was that? And he says, oh, I didn't say what you think I said, miss. And I said, oh, good, what did you say? He says, I said shit, obviously thinking very hard, and then just stared at me horrified. I was trying so hard not to laugh, but I just told him, I thought that's what you said. Please don't use that language in my classroom. We were doing sketch comedy in 6th grade a few years back, and seeing as it was a nice day, we went outside to practice. From across the field, I see one of my students very clearly and aggressively trying to put his junk on a prone classmate. When I asked him, he said it was for his sketch, and he was playing a character named the Iron Teabag. The best was the follow-up text from my boss saying, I had to Google what teabagging was before I met with the kid. Sounds like they may have an instant classic on their hands. I had a kid show up to band with a massive black adult toy instead of his clarinet, and he honestly thought I wouldn't notice. Dude, everybody's gonna notice. Not a teacher, but a classmate in my drafting class was sent to the dean for 3D rendering a massive dong. My teacher saw it, commended him for his work, and asked him to print it out. He then stapled it to a referral and sent him to the dean. Glorious. Not a teacher, but we had an older lady as a science substitute in 8th grade. It was a hot June day and the windows were open. We were on the 2nd floor. My friend told the sub when she walked in the classroom that Jimmy had fallen out the window. When the sub looked out the window, she saw Jimmy lying on the ground contorted, and she passed out. We never got a chance to explain to her that it was a joke. He had just laid down on the sidewalk under the window. The two boys got suspended and that sub never came back. You guys probably left her with a very traumatic memory. I'm a male 5th grade teacher. One of my boys yelled out right before the 3:15 bell rang, "Everybody be quiet, I have a boner!" I was like, did he just say that? The way he said it made me giggle like a schoolgirl. Luckily, no one noticed me turn and bust out laughing. No one else really seemed to notice what he had said. The bell rang to go home and I call him over. I asked him if he knew what that was. Very innocently, he said no. Then I thought, oh great. I could tell by his face that he wasn't lying. So I said, well, it's when your private parts get hard. Right when I said that, he got this very scared look on his face and said, "I promise I didn't know that." Like I said, I could tell he wasn't lying. I had a very hard time keeping a straight face. He said his friend had yelled that out once, so he thought he would. I told him he can't say those kinds of things, and he has to be careful what he says. He walked away very embarrassed. I laughed and laughed when he left the room. Kids at that age be saying some crazy things without really knowing what they're talking about. A girl got so drunk that she locked herself in the bathroom. We found her and obviously had to call her parents to come take her home. We kept telling her, "Listen, it's your dean, and you have to unlock the door." She kept responding in the horrible drunk teenager voice, "Now you listen, I'm your dean." It was very difficult for us to not break down in laughter. Stupid kids. Getting drunk at school doesn't exactly sound like a good time. 2 of my 5th grade students were arguing on our way back to music class, so I went over to see why they were talking in line. I asked what was going on, and the first kid said that the other kid had called him gay. The second kid looked me straight in the eye and said, "I didn't call him gay, I called him a B word." I sent them on their way to the principal's office and sarcastically thanked them for the extra paperwork. I worked in a computer-based classroom at one point where the students took many of their classes online. Some of them tried to cheat the system by copying and pasting short phrases into all the fill-in-the-blank or essay responses, hoping it'd glitch and pass them through. Quickly discovered one student had been pasting homo 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 into all his responses, which backfired pretty well in one particular instance. Question: copy the words that apply to you. Answer: homo homo homo. I hope you marked them all incorrect except for that one. First year of high school, I got sent to the principal's office by my near-retirement teacher for breaking dress code with my t-shirt that had drug references and paraphernalia on it. The funny part was when my principal had to explain to my teacher that Billabong is a legitimate clothing company name, and nothing more. In 6th grade, during a school mass, my buddies made up a thing called Wiener Whack Wednesday. Self-explanatory. Go around nut-tapping everyone. Well, our really hot teacher caught 2 kids doing it, and we had a whole lecture our next period. She asked if any of us knew anything about it, and all the girls told the teacher what was up. Every single guy in our class, 15 at the time, small Catholic school, got called to the office. We had to take turns talking to the principal and explaining that none of us were gay. Then she made us call our parents. I was really freaking out that my father would think I was gay. I love how this is going on and that's their concern. Not the fact that y'all are just whipping it out and smacking each other with it, as long as you're not gay. Not a teacher, but saw a kid stand up in Russian class to do a speech on a topic of World War II Russia. He decided to do the whole speech on why Hitler was the greatest. Now, our teacher was born in Russia, grew up during the Soviet Union, and came to Minnesota to teach. She was horrified. If you think that the United States hates Hitler and Nazis the most, you've not studied Russia and World War II. I was glad, because this knucklehead and his douchey friends ruined Russian class for 4 years. I had this obnoxious, smarmy, show-offy 5th grader. One day, he was up to his usual tomfoolery, and a girl silently got up, opened the classroom pencil sharpener, and dumped the shavings all over the kid. I had to send her to the office, but it was a truly satisfying moment for the whole class. Sounds like she was willing to take one for the team there. I was covering another teacher's class in a computer lab, and we have a program called Net Support that basically allows you to spy on the kids' computers. It also serves some legitimate instructional purposes, like allowing you to take control of a kid's computer so you can demonstrate things. Only this teacher never used it, so I don't think the kids knew it existed. I normally don't use it because I don't like the big brother vibe it gives off, but there was a kid being a totally obnoxious jerk. He was looking up stupid and distracting videos and laughing loudly about them and making obnoxious comments to show off in front of his friends. I could have blocked YouTube, but instead I took control of his computer. I started typing in kitten videos into YouTube, My Little Ponies, anything that I could think of that wouldn't be cool for him or his friends. Then, every time he started to freak out and insist to his friends that he wasn't doing it, I gave him back control, and shortly after would take it away again. Then finally, I made a little pop-up come up on his screen that said, "I'm watching you." I expected him to figure out what was going on, but I think he got freaked out instead. It never seemed to occur to him that it was me, so I gave him control back and he did his work quietly for the rest of class. We had this in the engineering building. I was a teacher's assistant and this kid was playing some flash game rather than doing whatever design project he was supposed to be doing. So I would wait until just as he was about to beat a level and ever so slightly screw him up. He didn't know I had this ability, so he was getting crazy frustrated. Seeing him get visibly frustrated, I went over to his desk and said something along the lines of, "I know the program can be hard to learn. Let me see what you've got so far and I'll help." Oh, the shame he had when he turned high screen and didn't even have SolidWorks or whatever open. If I were you, I would have just kept messing with him for the rest of the day. I went to a small Catholic high school in the Seattle area. We had monthly Mass in our gym, and every year around Easter we did the Stations of the Cross. Mass was always brutal, but the stations lasted 2.5 hours or so. Unreal. A little background, I couldn't burp until I was in my early 20s. I have no clue why, but any built-up gas had only one exit. Growing up, I farted to the point that people thought I had a medical condition. People even called me Fart Boy. Anyway, it was my senior year and we were headed to the dreaded Stations of the Cross Mass. My friends and I had let one rip in class a number of times, but never during Mass. We always talked about doing it, but never mustered the courage. I decided about a week before that this would be the day. The Mass was set up where the choir would sing before each station. I think there were 11 or something, and then the priest would ramble on about its significance. Each time the choir stopped, there would be about 10 seconds of complete silence. We're on the 5th station and the choir is finishing when all of a sudden I unleashed a behemoth right as everything went silent. I was sitting on gym bleachers, which probably amplified the blast perfectly. I remember the guy in front of me inexplicably holding a yellow plastic screwdriver, and he dropped it. In shock or from the blast wave, we'll never know. My buddy and I proceeded to muffle our laughter for at least an hour until Mass ended. I've never tried to not laugh for that long before or since. Each time one of us would start to settle down, the other would release a cackle that started the whole process over again. We didn't even get in trouble. I'm sure the teachers thought it was an accident or never wanted to speak of it again. I'm laughing right now. One of my favorite memories. In high school, I got called into the principal's office. They put a screenshot of the Urban Dictionary entry for Cleveland Steamer in front of me and asked why I was looking at that. I laughed my butt off and said I was just doing some research and got sent back to class. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, don't Google it. I used to work in a super strict school for kids who got kicked out of their regular schools. We had an assembly twice a day, morning and afternoon, that was extremely serious. Kids had to sit up straight with their hands in their laps, girls on one side and boys on the other. Totally silent, that kind of thing. Occasionally, when we were having behavior problems with entire groups, we'd make them sit in assembly for the remainder of that period or however long until they could get it together. There was a class of middle schoolers, naturally, who could not stop farting. They'd intentionally fart as loud as they could to be gross and disruptive, and it even evolved into them getting up out of their seats and farting on each other. This is hilarious to me now, but it got really old and really smelly. Anyway, one day it was happening so much throughout each class that we took them to assembly. I'm standing in front with one of the other teachers, and our principal was talking to them, except he was mad. So he's pacing back and forth, reaming these kids out, punching his fist into his hand, spit flying out of his mouth. His face is bright red. He's saying all this stuff about respect, and then he adds in, "Oh, and if you have to fart?" And he yelled the word fart with such venom and disdain that I just lost it right there in front of everyone. I could not stop laughing. I tried to play it off like a coughing fit or something, but I couldn't. I had to leave the room. Not a teacher, but the last time I was sent to the principal's office was over a live chicken in high school. The high school I went to used the 8-block schedule system. My last period teacher was afraid to the point of hilarity of birds. We had chickens at home, and since they were 4-H chickens, they were quite docile. I put one in a duffel bag one morning and then put it in the top shelf of my locker. They'll just fall asleep if it's dark. So once last period came, I put it in the bag. She was used to us all bringing bags in since it was last period, and when she got up to put the attendance slip on the door, I just took it out of the bag and put it in the middle of the room. Hilarity ensued, and I spent the next day playing Pokemon in suspension in the cafeteria. Is it really suspension if they just let you hang out and play Pokemon? The year was 1987. Second grade me decided to bring the penthouse mags I found under my dad's bed to school. I found them the night before and thought up this whole plan. It was cold, so I slid them in between the pocket of my jacket before leaving in the morning. Shortly thereafter on the playground, I was showing my buddies all these beautiful women. Finally, get to class and found out my teacher was ill and was replaced by a sub. Thinking I had it made, I slid the mags under all my papers in my box and just went about my day. Just before lunch, the sub started going through boxes, searching for a folder for the neighboring teacher. That's when she screamed. The sub was waving the penthouse at me while dragging me to the principal's office. To make things that much better, my sweet 80-year-old grandma was the one to pick me up. I made the mistake of leaving a 9th grader in my classroom when he missed the bus home. I had to go to a meeting and it was pouring rain, so I let him stay. I told him not to use the computers. The meeting was in the computer lab. We were learning how to see all of the students' computers on our own screens. The tech guy had us all pull up our first period classes on our monitors to test it out. No student should have been logged onto a computer at the time. All the screens should have been blank. I saw that a very conservative Jehovah's Witness teacher in the row ahead of me had one screen lit up on her multi-screen view. I watched as she clicked on the screen to see it larger. She gasped. She made a small whining sound. It was anime-style adult content. It was the screen of the student I had left alone in my room. The teacher quickly turned around, calling my name very loudly, and asked if the student was in my classroom. I told her he was. I got up and went to the phone at the back of the room. I called my classroom number. The student answered. I said, "You're doing something you shouldn't be right now, aren't you?" He said, yeah. I said, "I suggest you turn it off right now." I heard footsteps running across the floor and a slam. He returned to the phone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later," I said. I hung up. What an unlucky kid. He chose to watch that on the wrong day at the wrong time. I don't know about unlucky. Sounds like he just made a really bad decision. There was a student with autism who lived in a very literal world. We'll call him T. You had to be very precise with your words, as T could not comprehend slang or figurative language. He had an issue with another student at recess the day prior. It was something minor about a basketball. Basically, T had a basketball and placed it under the goal and walked away. Another student grabbed it, T became angry and ultimately gave the ball to the other student rather begrudgingly. Apparently, T told his uncle, and the uncle's response was, "I'd have made that kid eat a poop sandwich." Well, T made a quick stop by the litter box before coming to school. He also wrote a note to the other kids saying, "I get the ball today, you can have this poop sandwich." It wasn't a gesture he viewed as inappropriate. He actually thought the poop sandwich was a viable option for the other student. I had to send him to the office, but my God did I laugh. Even his mom laughed before apologizing. The principal still has the note in the office 2 years later. I'm sure the kid receiving the sandwich probably didn't find it as funny. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is. A kid in her class asked if she had any kids. At the time, I was my mother's only child. She mentioned me and the kid goes, "Well, what school does he go to?" And of course, my mom answers without hesitation. The kid goes, "Good, I'm gonna blow it up." Instantly expelled. Yeah, I don't think there's any other course of action to deal with something like that. I didn't even send the kid. I was too amused. I asked one of my students to come smash a giant spider on my desk. Being 9 years old, he walked up with an impressive swagger, trying to show all his friends how brave he was. He took one look at it and whispered, "Oh, F word." I was the only person who heard him, so I just stifled my laughter and told him I wouldn't write him up if he killed it. He did and was the talk of the lounge at lunch. I teach at a university, so I didn't send him to the principal, just out of class. I once told a student to leave class because he never brought his textbook and constantly played on his phone. So after 2 classes of this, I told him to get out because he was distracting other students. This kid freaked out, yelling and cursing at me. Keep in mind, I'm a 5'2" female and this kid's about 6 feet. The rest of the class is like, "What the heck?" And I stared him down and said, "Get the F out of my classroom!" Kid picked up his books and left. From that point on, anytime someone screwed up in class, the rest of the class would shout, "Get out of my classroom!" at them. They all thought it was hysterical that I cowed this giant. I mean, you gotta let them know who's boss early on.
Why cheat when you can leave the relationship? Because you can't cheat when you're not in a relationship. Duh. Some people get a dopamine hit in their brain from cheating and a sense of comfort and familiarity being in a relationship. They want both. Not proud of it, but I did it once upon a time. Never again. The rush and excitement of a new love is not worth all the guilt you feel, the pain you cause others, and the horrible feeling you get when you realize that you are not a nice person. I recently read a study where they measured the level of regret in women after episodes of high-risk sex. They were looking at hookup culture, but cheating was included. They identified a cycle of hookup, regret, and doing it again. They postulated that the purpose of regret as an emotion was to limit the behavior, and that regret might grow with subsequent episodes. However, what they found was that the level of regret diminished with each subsequent episode, such that after several flings, a woman engaging in high-risk sex has no regret at all. I recognize that hooking up is not exactly the same as cheating, but the study would suggest that once a cheater, always a cheater, is not necessarily true. A person who arrests cheating behavior early might regain mastery over their behavior, i.e., it suggests a marriage can likely be salvaged after an isolated failure, but an ingrained pattern of behavior might be irredeemable. Therefore, the standard advice of kick her to the curb might not be the best option, and a more nuanced assessment would be more appropriate. However, a serial cheater is likely to have a hard time getting control of their compulsion, as their regret diminishes to zero. I'd love to hear opinions from women on this. I would also love to hear women's opinions on this. I asked myself the question when I had a woman who was trying to cheat on her husband with me. I was like, if she's as miserable as she says, why not leave? Had a friend give me this exact explanation, and it made a lot of sense. So much security and safety, and they are too lazy to make a change for themselves. I came close to cheating once, and it was because I didn't admit to myself just how unhappy I was in the relationship. I kept telling myself I can make it work. Then I was put in an environment that had several ladies that were happy to talk to me and be around me. That dopamine hit was massive, and I can 100% see how it can just happen. Luckily, I allowed myself to be honest about my feelings and broke up with my ex before I did anything. Do everybody a favor. Always be honest with yourself. That last bit, absolutely words to live by. From my understanding, it's better to have the safety net of the familiar and go do whatever than to end things and risk things not working out. Easier to use someone as a safe space and explore rather than taking the risk alone. I had a jerk of a housemate tell me once it's because it made the breakups easier for him. He'd cheat and make sure his partner found out, and that way they could get all mad at him and never want to speak to him again, and he could just go about his life like nothing happened. There's a certain thrill to sneaking around. Some people get off on the gotta hide whatever feeling they get from cheating. Also, if they leave the relationship, then they lose whatever perks of that relationship. It's hard to survive in the world on a single income. When there are kids and a mortgage involved, it's easier said than done. Not condoning it, but conventional and flawed wisdom often values stability and security over honesty. And sometimes people just get stuck in abusive, one-sided relationships, but their upbringing has taught them to stick through it, no matter how bad it gets. The short answer is that the person cheating is usually and often accurately perceives that they, and often their children and perhaps even their spouse, believe it or not, few cheaters simply don't care about their partner's well-being, would be financially devastated and emotionally traumatized by blowing up their shared household, and since no one cheats with an intent to get caught, this is the way to remedy the missing spark without sacrificing the household stability of everyone else. This is the kind of answer that comes from someone that purely values objects and money and doesn't actually care about anyone else's feelings, while simultaneously trying to gaslight someone into believing that they are the least selfish person in the room. Like, personally, I abhor betrayal and treachery of any kind. I'm not religious, and I only know this because I watched the frickin' Dante's Inferno video game movie with all the different styles and everything, but there is a reason why treachery is the ninth circle of hell. My marriage ended with infidelity. In my experience, it didn't happen all at once. It was a gradual thing. 1 year we were a little distant, then the distance grew cold, and then we were like two cubicle workers making our life run. But along the way, there were exciting milestones that made me think that we were succeeding, that we were happy. A graduate degree, the purchase of a little home together, the decision to try for a baby, the joy a year later when we finally succeeded, new jobs, the birth of our kid, moving to a new city. And there was heartbreak, the death of his father, my battle with postpartum depression, a job loss, illness in the family, my parents divorcing after 40 years of marriage. It was easy to point to those things as the reason we felt so apart. We weren't ready to admit admit that there was something broken between us two. So I assume when his co-worker was a sparkly new friend and they found themselves working late at the office more and more frequently, over time, I'm sure their pull toward one another just grew. But here's the thing. My first marriage was over before he cheated. The question was, as Esther Perel puts it, was whether I would spend my second marriage with the same person. His new partner made it an easy answer for both of us. I don't blame the cheating for my divorce, though. It was just a symptom of something already wrong. For me, his affair gave me clarity about the fact that we hadn't been happy for a long time. It's been 7 years since we split, and our daughter is incredible. We co-parent beautifully together. He married his co-worker, they have a 2-year-old together, and she's a great stepmother to my kid. My career has taken off and I'm remarrying later this year. I am so grateful he asked for the separation and for the person I became after my divorce. Cheating isn't always this black and white thing people make it out to be. Time heals all wounds. I know this person clearly had a lot of time to reflect and contextualize how things ended the way they did, and I'm glad that everyone seems to have walked away from the situation to better lives. Still don't condone cheating of any kind, though. Cheating is a suck-butt thing to do, and I'm not defending it, but many married people are financially bound together but unhappy. It's the wrong thing to do, but it may go some way toward explaining it in many circumstances. Because people don't cheat because they want a new relationship, they cheat because they want the excitement of a casual relationship and the comfort of a long-term relationship at the same time. If I'm trying to put myself in a cheater's shoes, then the 3 reasons I would assume are 1. Lust. This form of cheating is physical and not much thought put into it. 2. Happiness. This is when someone feels trapped, marriage, kids, history, and just wants a moment to escape and relies on the affair partner to make them happy. 3. Safety net. Cheaters think about it this way. Why would you leave a job without having another job lined up already? It ensures that they won't go through a period of feeling undesired. From my understanding, the reason for cheating and staying in a relationship can be a myriad of reasons. Some people have such low self-esteem that the minute they get any attention from someone else they consider attractive, they have a hard time shutting them down. Others have a very separate idea of a stable love from a committed relationship and attraction from a fling. In these scenarios, the perpetrator still loves their partner, but they fall victim to their personal issues and betray their partner's trust. Others, however, are more narcissistic and view their staying in a relationship despite cheating as a favor to their partner. Others still may come from very traditional backgrounds and feel they can't leave their relationships despite no longer loving them. All of this doesn't even account if there are children in the picture too. Do people really not get this? People don't want to be single or in a new relationship. They want all the perks of their existing relationship plus the thrill of something new. They aren't trying to be fair or considerate or reasonable. They want everything they already have plus more, and they think they'll get away with it so no one will get hurt. Yeah, I pretty much completely agree with everything this person says, but this is already a downer topic, so I'm not going to get too deep into some of this stuff. Emotional immaturity and codependency. It's easier to let go of someone when someone else desires you. Basically, they want out and they've made up their mind about it. You may have no clue yet. They're not interested in working through issues. They're done. So to make things easier for themselves, they cheat. This way, they're getting the attention their low self-esteem needs from outside the relationship and no longer have to regard your feelings. They expect you to be upset when you find out. In fact, that feeds their low self-esteem even more. Your anger, confusion, and disappointment makes it more likely you'll say or do something in retaliation. Any such action on your part makes it easier for them to justify in their own mind that they were right in choosing to leave you. To them, things ended a long time ago, so they don't really see it as cheating. They use cognitive dissonance to cope with how they feel about themselves. Pointing this out to them doesn't help them, and especially doesn't help you. In fact, the bigger of a deal you make it, the more you'll be gaslit. Don't expect fairness or accountability from this person. If it goes public, you're likely screwed, as people who are capable of convincing themselves they're in the right in this kind of situation have no problem making things up in order to preserve their public image. The best thing to do once you become aware of it is nothing. Anything you do in terms of confrontation will only make things worse. Instead, quietly get your affairs in order until you're in the financial position to cut and run. The person you thought you knew is gone. Think of them like an alien who took over your former partner's body. Lament in private. Cover your butt while you're exposed. Leave on your timeline, never look back or engage. They are now dead to you. Ultimately, people will respect you more for your maturity and you'll give the ex no grounds to come after you. In fact, they may even implode, but that doesn't matter. How they feel doesn't matter anymore. Winning is getting away cleanly. Because one, divorce is expensive, like really expensive, and most people can't afford rent and mortgage on one salary these days. Plus, long-term financial plans will be seriously derailed. 2, change is scary for everyone. Clearly, the marriage that now sucks was once a great idea. Now it's not, but it was a big deal not to be taken lightly. New relationships are extra exciting, and someone who is married has seen the extra exciting relationship turn into something not great. The new thing has no guarantee, and cheating gives the best of both worlds. 3, maybe there are kids involved. Staying together for the kids is an awful idea, but 7 seconds of getting your noodle wet trumps disappointing your kids for life, unless you get caught. 4, people suck. Everyone has done something they shouldn't have and there is a rush to it. Maybe it was a little white lie. Maybe it was something criminal. Either way, it was the easy way out and you were delighted you didn't get caught. The first time it was difficult but rewarding. The next time was less difficult, but still rewarding. Eventually, it's just rewarding. Monkey branching, too afraid to jump without having something to hold on to. People stuck in emotionally abusive relationships often cheat as an escape. Simply breaking up is much easier said than done due to the amount of psychological control that's usually involved. Because you have to keep the main person around in case the side piece doesn't work out. You have attachment issues. You're financially tied to a person. There are many reasons. None of them are good reasons, but people who cheat don't care. Don't mind me, I'm just thinking about King of the Hill and Nancy Hicks Gribble cheating on Dale Gribble with John Redcorn. There's the bit where they're doing the duck boats and Nancy's all like, no wonder I need 2 men in my life. One of them keeps letting me down. Because you don't want to leave the relationship, you just want to have sex with other people. As a retired serial cheater in my teens and early 20s, this is an honest answer. Some people are legit skeezy. Others are genuinely in love with their partner but also have other asexual needs and don't know how to square that circle. I'm definitely against cheating, but I think it's important to challenge the idea that cheaters are all evil, weak, foolish, etc. Cheating is quite common, even among people who maintain otherwise healthy relationships. I think the cultural fantasy we have that 2 people can always fully provide for each other's needs and that true love conquers all is really quite childish, a fairy tale. Certainly it is not 100% impossible for 2 people to be able to meet most of each other's needs. It can happen, but it's incredibly far from universal. I don't think that everyone should be polyamorous, but I do think that many people really need to be and should, and that some people need to be but don't have any of the skills necessary to manage polyamorous relationships. I've never cheated, by the way. Psychotherapist Esther Perel has a lot of really intelligent and useful stuff to say about this topic. She's helped a lot of relationships come back from that place of broken trust, and she is much better than me at explaining why cheating doesn't necessarily mean that the cheater is a bad person or doesn't love their partner, and at explaining why our current cultural views of romance and relationships really set a lot of us up for failure. Which is not to say that all cheaters are loving, good people. They are certainly much more likely to not be than the average. My point is more that it's not a universal thing, and we should be looking more deeply into this. So I briefly looked into who this Esther Perel person was because I was interested. And in the brief time I've been looking this person up, I probably can't exactly make that many assumptions about who they are or anything or what their theory is exactly, but I don't particularly like what I'm hearing from them in their talks and whatnot. Maybe it's just my principles getting in the way of me being enlightened by these groundbreaking ideas, and I say that with quotation marks. It all sounds very intelligent in that they've mastered the oratory arts. They're just a very good speaker. They have chosen the perfect words to get their argument across and everything, but at the same time there is just a lack of morality, it seems, and even awareness that cheating, infidelity in itself is just inherently cruel to do to an individual who isn't aware or casually and callously abusing the relationship and whatnot. God damn, just open up a frickin' dialogue. Also, if you're interested in this author's ideas, go check them out yourself because I'm not slandering them. I'm more just wondering how this person became, and I quote, a national authority on modern relationships. I love my partner and would die for her, but I haven't been asexually attracted for a very long time. I get through sex with her because of the love, but I don't look at her and see someone that I find attractive. I wish I did, and I'm mad at myself for not, but I can't help it. Breaking up has a lot of consequences that people don't want to deal with. If they live with their partner, they'll probably have to move out, which is a headache and expensive. They might depend on their partner financially and can't afford to break up, or they aren't willing to give up their current lifestyle/income. It will be really hard on the kids if they have any, and so they don't want to break up the family. They might lose joint friends and other relationships that they have together, because they will usually side with one or the other. Most divorces are incredibly expensive and taxing for both parties. You could be going in and out of court for months or even years. If you're worried about that last thing, then that's why you should get a prenup. A prenup is a prenuptial agreement that basically says your finances and properties and whatever will be divvied up in this way, and you can both agree that in case of a divorce, no one gets anything. And it's a very good way of sussing out what the person you are marrying's real intentions are and what they value before you get married. What if there is a woman in an abusive relationship with someone she is afraid to leave? If she tells him it's over, he will blow up. If she just sneaks out and leaves and lives on her own, he might find her and still get to her. She has been with this abusive guy so long, she doesn't think she can leave. He tells her how terrible she is, how worthless she is, and that she should be happy that he puts up with her. She might not have an income or money of her own. Some people take care of all the money and only give a bit to their partner when they ask. Let's say this woman meets another man. She meets him at work, she meets him through mutual friends, maybe an old flame looks her up. He is kind to her, and she starts to feel like she might matter a bit. Like maybe she isn't so awful, but she can't just move in with this other guy. So they start a relationship. She is finding a way to escape and a way to rebuild herself. When she has the self-esteem to leave, she also has a way to maybe get some financial and emotional support and protection. Believe it or not, I would honestly say that if you're with an abusive person, then yeah, feel free to cheat on them. If they hit you, if they smack you around, make you feel like crap every day, legitimately abuse you, then yeah, you can do whatever the hell you want. If it means you can somehow get out of that relationship, except kill them, because where does that leave you? My mom tried to leave my dad for years. He was an extremely angry person who was physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially abusive. It was bad. Cops were involved a lot during my childhood from domestic disputes. They never did anything. He wouldn't let her leave. She tried. It always ended up with her and my siblings and I being hurt by him. He's got 2 kids me or my siblings have never met from affairs. He told my mom it was her fault. One day she met someone and they fell in love, and she eventually told him about it. It was a really scary time, but he kicked her out for it. I know that was the happiest day of her life because she finally got away. It's been about 10 years. She's still with that person she met, and I've never thought for 1 second my mom was wrong for cheating. There are a few things more hurtful than cheating. Just be honest and say you want out. That's better for everyone. Also, preserves the would-be cheater's honor. Money. The old saying, it's cheaper to keep him/her. No-fault divorce is being outlawed in a few states. It's hard to believe, but it's turning into a thing. Well, it's better to be a poor man's joy than a rich man's toy. Oh, take it from me. You ought to see upon that love there's only misery. And it's better to be a man's whole world than a sometimes girl. Ruby Winter's better for those of you wondering, and I know most of y'all are just here for the Reddit stories and all that, but come on, I'm trying to give you dinner and a show here most of the time. I think people who cheat have tunnel vision and lack of foresight and insight. A friend of mine is a serial cheater. He's always in some sort of relationship that he completely dive bombs into without any thought, and it ends in chaos every time. I think he does it because he enjoys the thrill of it, and also he's terrified to be single. Possibly mental illness plays a part in this. He is financially ruined from his last divorce because of his cheating, but moved in with his new girl within a month. It's so exhausting to watch from the outside. Cheating can be a misguided attempt to address unhappiness within a relationship. Some individuals may struggle with the emotional difficulty of ending a partnership, fearing confrontation, loneliness, or the upheaval of their lives. Instead, they may seek temporary solace or validation through infidelity. However, cheating undermines trust, hurts both parties involved, and can cause long-term damage. While leaving a relationship requires courage and honesty, it provides an opportunity for personal growth, finding a more compatible partner, and fostering healthier connections in the future. I think most of the time cheating is an emotional thing, not a logical thing. I once knew someone who was in a dying relationship. The relationship was going nowhere and she was losing interest in her boyfriend. The right thing to do would be break up with her boyfriend. Instead, she cheated on him and then she almost immediately confessed to him and begged for forgiveness. At a glance, this would look like a passionate mistake and then instant remorse. But in my time knowing her, she always hated taking responsibility or being blamed for things. I have seen her seriously hurt people, including me, to avoid taking blame or responsibility. I think she subconsciously thought that if she broke up with her boyfriend, he'd be angry and he'd blame her. So she couldn't break up with him. She doesn't want that kind of responsibility. But if instead of breaking up with him, she cheated on him, then he would break up with her. Her cheating makes the breakup A, his responsibility, and B, inevitable. So she can't chicken out of it anymore. Note that this plan does not make 100% sense. It's worse to be blamed for cheating than for breaking up. But when she doesn't want to be blamed for something, she really will hurt people, so they will do things that she doesn't want to take responsibility for. Anyways, her plan backfired. Her boyfriend decided to forgive her and give her another chance. A few days later, she broke up with him. It just sounds really vindictive to me at a certain point. Like, God damn, you're toying with people's emotions here. And by the way, I'm not down for cheating in either way. If anyone's got the impression that I'm like, yeah, boys or anything like that, no, I just think cheating of any kind with anyone just hurts people, and it sucks so goddamn badly. This one just made me sad to read through. Then again, quite a few of these have made me sad lately. I need a happier topic.
Teachers of Reddit, what's the most shocking or surprising thing you've seen going on in your classrooms? A kid stuck a Kraft pipe cleaner in an electrical socket. Cue a flash, a yelp, and blue fuzz everywhere. Socket and cover were both burned black and didn't get replaced for 3 years. The student was an 8th grader. I knew a kid who put a paperclip in an electrical socket and thought wrapping it in paper would protect him from the shock. In grade 10, the idiot had to go to the hospital because it screwed up his heartbeat. No matter what age you are, I think you should know you don't mess with electrical sockets. Back when I was in school, we had 3 of the 6 ambulance teams in the whole county called out to the school because one sunny day, someone passed the fad around that kids should hyperventilate and have someone push on their chests until they passed out. If I remember correctly, some 14 students had to be checked out and 1 taken to the hospital. I was a long-term sub for an art teacher that taught in the cafeteria. She warned me about a kinder kiddo named Romeo that had many issues, and told me to basically never turn my back on the class while he was in it. I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I was a genius substitute. But anywho, I turned around to grab something from the art cart and I heard a gasp from the other 22 kiddos. I turned around and he was standing on the lunch table with his pants down, shirt pulled up and yelling, "Who wants to kiss it? My name's Romeo!" I was mortified. I'd hate to know where the kid learned that behavior. My dad is a teacher, and this is his favorite story. As a PhD student, he was teaching American history at a small high school. As he was lecturing, he noticed an odd smell and an enormous football player walking toward him from the back of the class. The football player hands my dad a note which says, "I have just pooped myself." Not a word is said. My dad simply nods to the student, and the student walks quietly out of the room to handle the matter. My dad kept the note for around 20 years, and would occasionally ponder the grammar of pooping oneself instead of just pooping oneself without the extra poop. There was a strange craze of crapping in books and leaving them in the library. Somehow, nobody was ever caught. One time when we were watching a movie in class, I saw the girl next to me touching herself. Let's just say my 16-year-old body full of hormones had good material for the next 6 months. What movie were you watching? One day, our teacher didn't show up to class, and neither did her substitute. Some kid gave a 50-minute lecture on pimpology during that time. Sounds like the kid saw an opportunity and took it. I went to a small music school where basically everyone smoked all day. One day during midterm review, our audio professor yelled at the whole class for being under the influence for about 20 minutes. Nobody knew what to do. A very large, peculiar boy by the name of Thomas was caught pleasuring himself by sticking his stuff into the pages of books and thrusting. Might I mention typical Tom, as he was referred to, was a junior in high school. Surely you have better ways of taking care of that. A student pooped in the attic and threw it all over the walls during a break, then played it off as if it wasn't him and invited people to see. He's still in school. Not from my time as a teacher, but still relevant. Way back when I was a youth, there was a guy in science class. Let's call him Dan. Now, Dan was one of those kids who, for one reason or another, failed at all challenges involving common sense. He also liked to crush up chalk and snort it during science class. About the only thing Dan was good for was soccer. He played in the school team and was regarded as our best striker. Anyway, Dan's stupidity came to a head one day during an experiment set up by one of our chemistry teachers. She had a large container of chlorine gas she'd procured prior to the lesson at the front of the class. She explained what she was going to do, what the gas was, and ended her explanation with a stern, "Do not breathe this in." Then she got distracted by something and had to leave the room for a moment. She was gone no more than a second when Dan stood, dashed to the front of the class, opened the container, and took a long, deep, hearty snort of chlorine gas. The airborne ambulance made remarkably good time getting to the school, and somehow saved Dan Dan's life, but it was a while before he came back to school, and he was a changed kid. He couldn't play football anymore. His lungs were permanently damaged, and even running short distances left him gasping for air. Not sure what became of Dan, but he taught me a valuable lesson about chlorine gas. Apparently it was used as a weapon during World War I. I can see why. I hate to say it, but this is Darwinism at its finest. In my classroom, we kept a television screen which can be connected to wirelessly. One day I was setting up a DVD about World War II, and it came up in the top right, Billy's iPhone connected. It then proceeded to play the infamous Paris Hilton tape. The kid was utterly shocked and later admitted it was a mistake. He was watching it in the back of the room and somehow connected it to the TV. Oh, poor Billy. I'm a high school teacher in American Samoa, a US territory. Tattooing is a huge cultural thing. A student I know, P, comes to me before school and asks if he can hang out in my room at lunch. Sure thing, I tell him. It's pretty common for kids to grab their lunch and hang out in a teacher's room. Come lunchtime, L comes to my room and asks if P has shown up. They're supposed to meet in my room at lunch. He hasn't shown up, so she sits and waits for him. Soon after, P comes in carrying his backpack and lunch. I'm sitting at my desk eating my lunch. Suddenly, I hear a zzz sound. As soon as I heard the sound, I recognize it. I turn my head. L is sitting at a desk with one of her sleeves rolled all the way up. P is holding a tattoo gun in his hand a mere inch away from L's arm. What are you two doing? P does tattoos, miss. He's gonna do something for me on my arm. You can't get a tat in my classroom, L. P, put away your equipment. You can't give a tat in my room or at school for that matter. Tattooing being a cultural thing or not, I feel like that's a pretty brave move. I can't claim credit for this story, but it's a goodie that allegedly happened in my buddy's 4th or 5th grade class. So this 4th grader, that will henceforth be known as Conrad, apparently went on a family trip to China and came back with a pencil decorated with intricate dragon design that he absolutely adored. Like during class, he would take it out of his pencil bag and put it on his desk just to look at and admire, but never used or even sharpened it. One day, when Conrad left the room to use the bathroom or something, the kids sitting on his right, who we'll call Jim, picked up the dragon pencil, stuck it in a pencil sharpener, and ground that beautiful work of art until it was just an eraser with a stub, with a tiny amount of dragon design still visible. When Conrad comes back into the room, he seats himself and looks forward, noticing what's become of his most prized possession, but doesn't say a word. He then grabs the sharpened pencil that he'd been using to write, screams, and stabs it through the hand of the kid sitting to his left, Bill, incorrectly assuming he was the culprit. Needless to say, Conrad didn't come back to class the next day, or ever again. Not sure what's good with Bill's hand. Eesh, Bill was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll be honest, I was rooting for Conrad though. I taught choir for several years to 7th and 8th graders. I've seen some stuff, man. One day I'm assisting another music teacher in a very big school, and things are going pretty smooth. I see this one kid looking kind of gray. Then he sways a bit and starts turning green. I know where this color-changing act is headed, so I signal for the kid to head to the trash can. He made it to the can, but then threw up so violently that he sprayed it all over the walls and the double doors. I thought the sweet little sopranos that sat in that part of the room were either going to puke themselves or pass out. I had a hard time not laughing at them. So I send the kid to the nurse and go look for a custodian. I can't find one anywhere, so I have the secretary page one. Nobody shows up. I go looking again and find the head guy, old retired sailor, hiding in the kitchen doing something so he wouldn't have to clean up the puke. I tell him it's an emergency. The room was about 80 degrees as the HVAC was crap, and head to the room to help out with crowd control. Did I mention there were about 80 kids in the room? The custodian finally shows up and starts to mop the puke up and wipe down the walls. I walk over near him and say something like, "He really made a mess, huh?" The old salty dog replies in full voice, "Gosh darn effing kids making messes all over the gosh darn place. I hate this effing place." The sweet little sopranos were horrified. I had to walk away so I didn't lose it. Poor guy sounds like he's having a really bad day. I'm not a teacher, but my ex-girlfriend was. She had just started teaching kindergarten, and these two kids had a full-blown relationship. They would hold hands, kiss, and get angry when other kids started hollering at their partner. Weirded me the heck out when she told me. Kids start early these days. I was kind of a crazy kid in middle school, so I had this one friend. Let's call him Eric. The both of us were inseparable. Well, one day during study hall, we were both goofing off and had to be separated. So they put Eric in the quiet room. At the time, I thought it would be a neat idea to crawl through this air vent type thingy that was in the wall at knee level, which led into the quiet room right by Eric's feet. I quietly knocked out the other end and grabbed Eric by the feet, which made him scream. This, of course, got the attention of the teacher, who quickly ran over and grabbed my legs trying to pull me out of the air vent. Well, I didn't want to go peacefully, so I kept holding on to Eric's feet while the teacher kept pulling on my legs. It turned into a tug of war between my teacher and I, which I eventually won by crawling through the other end into the quiet room. I'm surprised I turned out normal. Hey, we all mess around when we're kids. Not a teacher, but one of the only memories I have from grade 1 was us sitting on the floor in the morning semicircle while our teacher went on about school stuff. There were about 3 rows to the semicircle with me sitting on the outside corner on a chair, so I could see everyone sitting down quite easily. We had this weird kid that just wasn't right. He'd belt out the national anthem as loud and off-key as possible every morning, even with everyone looking at him and not singing. So naturally, he decides that this semicircle is the perfect moment to whip it out and spit all over it. Then he spits on his fingers and starts Somehow I'm the only kid that sees it, not even the kids beside him. I sat there stunned for like 30 seconds wondering if anyone else was witnessing this, and why no one's doing anything, before the teacher noticed and snapped her fingers at him. He got the message. Props to her for not making a scene though. Kids are messed up. Not a teacher, but 2 kids would grope each other during class. The teacher never said anything, but it was pretty obvious, so she had to have noticed. The teacher probably just wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. My sister is a teacher. A girl had been disappearing for about 30 minutes a day in her homeroom period. After some investigation, it turns out the girl had been scheduling and giving blowies during that time. She didn't even make money off the deal either. She just gave them out of the goodness of her heart. In middle school, they had a detention in the study hall room, but the detention kids were put into separate rooms in the back with a tiny little window. There was a kid that pleasured himself in there, and the study hall teacher went in there and saw the kids' aftermath all over the wall. She yelled and told all of us to go into the hall. His phone was still out with adult content pulled up on it. The kid ended up being homeschooled after the incident, and I've only ever seen him once since graduation. A lot of the stories I'm hearing here seem to involve young kids needing to learn when to control themselves. This didn't actually happen on school property, but it was pretty shocking nonetheless. 2 boys were assigned to be partners for a project in school. For the sake of clarity, let's call one boy John and the other boy Fappy. They were working on the project together at John's parents' home. While there, unbeknownst to John, Fappy stole a key to the house. It seems that Fappy was into some kinky, albeit tame by today's standards, stuff. And so it was quite surprising to John's family when Fappy was found wearing John's mom's underwear and touching himself in John's parents' bed. Now, I'm not one to actually believe that a story such that one hears in the schoolyard is necessarily true. However, it just so happens that my parents were friends with John's parents. After hearing the story at school, I asked my mom about it, and she confirmed it. Surprising to no one, the story caught on like wildfire, and Fappy's reputation for being a cross-dressing, self-touching criminal preceded him for the remainder of his time at that high school. That's not really the shocking part, though. What actually surprised me about the whole incident was how insensitive the teachers, particularly the gym teachers, were to Fappy. They were just as ruthless as the students with their name-calling and such. I would go so far as to even say that they incited much of the abuse toward him, and even encouraged the other students to ostracize him. As a teacher, you'd think you'd want to bring up that incident regarding that kid as little as possible. It's really just cruel to keep it going. One day, I was walking into class when I heard kids yelling and screaming like maniacs. Turns out it was a smoke bomb brought from Mexico that left the room smoky and smelling like urine. We got our backpacks searched, but nothing was found. The kid then confessed after the backpack search, so he and the one who gave it to him left with an officer. I haven't seen them since. Ah, the classic stink bomb. I remember one of those going off in high school. My school tried to do an experiment and tried to put all the male below average grade students and delinquents into one English class taught by a female teacher. It did not go well for her. When she stepped out to use the bathroom, we emptied all the bookshelf and her desk and threw them out the window. Kids hid behind the blinds of the windows and slept. One kid missed his bus sleeping through the next 2 other periods. We made dominoes out of the books. She actually joined us for this one. Another time when she stepped out, we stood books up and threw knives and scissors at them to see if they would stick. Learned how to throw knives that day. We were on a second floor that partially looked out onto the roof of the first floor. Kids would often just leave and enter through the windows. Not sure why. Our school hall pass was just a red laminate that had hall pass crudely written on it. We broke open a locked drawer to find a lamination machine and made everyone hall passes. But the weirdest of all, we all passed and actually did fairly well in her class. I actually took a copy of The Day No Pigs Would Die Home because I liked it so much. Sounds like you had a good teacher for not only hanging in there, but actually managing to capture your attention along the way. I went to an all-boys secondary school and was 15 at the time this happened. Our class of 25 boys were coming back on a field trip in a packed minivan doing around 60 miles per hour on the motorway. The guy in the back right seat decides to announce that he's going to start pleasuring himself, and then stands up and goes through with it. There were 25 male adolescents on that bus. They weren't as shocked as the old couple in the next lane. Oh, that poor old couple. I'll never forget the look on that old woman's face as she peered into a school bus of children and proceeds to get an eye full of wang. The boy was expelled, rightfully so. In grade 4, my friends and I decided to protest in our class during lunch period because the school replaced the chip machine with healthy snacks. At first, it was no big deal. 5 or 6 of us just beginning to chant at our lunch monitor. But by lunch recess, it exploded into a full-force riot protest. We had hundreds of kids across 3 campuses in a colossal hive. It was one of my proudest moments, but it quickly turned into a nightmare when the teachers fought back. They tried to hurdle us up and gave an insane amount of detentions. I was one of the lucky few to escape before the genocide, but I still think to this day about those I lost that fateful day. Eventually, the school caved and offered semi-healthy snacks like Crispers and pretzels. I hope later generations appreciate the sacrifice we made, and I pray they live a more peaceful time than we did. I think our poster's blown this up into some grand battle in his head, but in actuality, most of these kids probably just wanted a reason to get out of class. We had a half-hour session with our mixed ability home class to start the day at my school, then all split up to go to lessons by ability streams for the rest of the day. I was in top groups for most things, but in this first hour, I generally ended up at the back of the room with the slower kids, and we started playing cards or poker dice. Never for money, though. After this had been going on for a few weeks, I was caught in a quiet corner by the teacher, and thought I'd get in trouble for leading them on. Instead, she just said how it was really good for them to concentrate for that length of time on something, especially something requiring maths and patterns, but that if any of the other staff came in, to hide it all quickly. It's always nice when you think you're going to get in trouble and you just get a general thumbs up from the teacher. Not a teacher, but also a student. At the age of 12 to 13, we had math class with a temporary teacher. Let's call the teacher A. In our class, we had the typical students who did stupid things without thinking. Let's call them B1 and B2. Out of nowhere, while everyone solved their math problems and A was walking around helping the students, B1 and B2 threw their pens and accidentally dropped it to different locations. That way, they could roam free in the classroom. When they went to pick up their pens, they'd also whip out their junk, doing the helicopter, and rubbing their junk on different furniture. It became almost like a game for them. The one who got caught first lost. How's that fun for you? It's just weird and you're creeping out everybody around you. Not me, but my parents are both teachers. My dad teaches drama and directs a school play each year. I can remember on the first night of one of these shows a few years back, he came back and said that whilst he was checking backstage during one of the set changes, he found a kid peeing into a bottle because he forgot to go to the toilet before his part. It was really funny, but shocking, because this is a really posh school. Hey, I don't care who you are, everybody's gotta pee. We had our study hall sign-in in the same room that kids would serve in-school suspensions. Well, one day I walked into a kid pleasuring himself and finishing all over the floor. He then zipped up his pants and walked out to a very stunned professor. Come on, guys, control yourselves! I'm not a teacher, but this happened to my friend. We were sitting in the back of the classroom, and being freshmen in the South, some of us picked up dipping tobacco. Not me though. So my friend decided he's gonna put a dip in class while the teacher was giving a lesson. If that wasn't dumb enough, a while later the teacher's done with the lesson and we're all just chit-chatting. But I notice he's sitting in his seat to himself. Moments later, he starts gagging and coughing, but no one really paid attention. We were pretty loud. I go up to him and check on him, and he said he threw up the dip. It was in the back corner of the classroom, so it wasn't noticeable. I glance over his desk to see there's tobacco-ridden puke with red juice all over it. I ask him what the heck that was. Apparently he didn't want to be caught with the dip, so he tried to make it seem like he threw up the juice instead. However, when he noticed that wasn't going to work either, he just left it. After I processed how stupid he was, the bell rang and we all left. Throw up still on the floor. I mean, in your situation, I guess you guys just call that one a win, right?
Children, what is something you found out about your parents that you never told them about? When I was around 10, my father came storming into my room and stiff-armed me into the wall. He screamed in my face through tear-filled, angry eyes. What did you do to it? I had no idea what he was talking about. He dragged me into the bathroom and pointed at a box of Arm & Hammer used to deodorize the bathroom. Still screaming, his hand squeezing the back of my neck so hard I thought he was going to snap my neck. I still pled ignorance. No clue what he was talking about. He threw me in my room and barricaded the door with a large dresser so I couldn't get out. Even though it was a pull. He left me in there for 3 days. No food, nothing. I was terrified. He never explained why he did what he did or what he was talking about. Found out later when my much older cousin confessed at a family Christmas party that she had broken into our home and stole my dad and stepmom's booger sugar stash that they hid in the Arm & Hammer. She said this like it was a funny family story. So my dad locked me up during a bender and almost killed me in the process. I'm now a dad and don't speak to my parents at all. Screw them. Found out the reason we were so poor growing up was because both my parents had a drinking and booger sugar issue. We always had a house, food, health insurance, and clothes. But a few years without Christmas and birthdays happened. We almost lost the house once. My parents were pretty high functioning for addicts to keep us. Oh well. I didn't know my dad had a wife before my mother until I was 18. I know that my mother is a convicted felon. Not my parents, but still my family. I also know my grandfather had an illegitimate child with my aunt. I put 2 and 2 together. My aunt is my mother's sister. My uncle is her son, but my mother's brother. And my cousin is my aunt's child. My uncle's siblings and my mother's niece. It was later confirmed by the other side of the family. My mother doesn't know that I know. But how did you find out your mother was a convicted criminal? Was it like a Wikipedia search? Did you Google then, eh? I always thought my father had a very small appetite. He'd eat a few bites of a meal and declare he was full. When I hosted my first big Thanksgiving in my house with my fiance, my father put away 3 pounds of potatoes, a whole pie, and more than half the turkey by himself. My mother remarked how he'd had a bottomless stomach since they were kids. I was telling my fiance later that night how oddly the remark struck me considering his track record. My fiance explained to me my father wasn't eating so there'd be enough to go around for me, my sister, and mother. I know their bank and budget details. My parents were raised never to talk about money. It was considered improper, which is not great when it comes to learning budgets, etc. Google saved my wallet. When I was real young, we didn't have much of it, and I'm sure that influences that attitude too. My father was forced to retire. Job qualifications were changed on him. More school versus early retirement after working for this one job his entire life. Mom had a government-funded job that got cut this year. I was worried about their finances. I wasn't planning on helping them out for at least another decade, and I've been anxious about them. Accidentally overheard them debating some stuff while visiting for Christmas. His 401k is okay, and it turns out he did get his pension. It's just reduced. Going to keep an eye on their needs, but I think they're going to be okay, minus any emergencies. My mother was bad touched as a kid by my grandfather. For the most part, she's normal, but she has some emotional issues and bouts of depression. My grandfather died before I was born. My grandmother and mother never talk about him, and I've never seen a picture of him. Honestly, I don't even know his name. My aunts told me one day when I asked why nobody talks about him when I was older. I think that's a pretty damn good reason to never bring someone up in conversation or even tell future generations in the family that person's name. They'd be dead to me too. In like an emotional way on top of the already literal way, I mean. My dad would always tell my little brother and I about this Russian girlfriend he had when he was younger. What he very conveniently left out, however, is that they got married so that she could have citizenship. Thank you, Ancestry.com. He still has no idea that I know anything about it. The circumstances of my parents' divorce. I was 10 when they separated, and they never really told us why. Just that their marriage wasn't working anymore. I didn't really care, so I didn't ask, but over the next few years I would eavesdrop on bits and pieces of conversations they had and eventually put the pieces together. Basically, my mom cheated on my dad with my now stepdad. My mom and now stepdad worked at the same high school, and my mom had taught each of his kids. When my dad became suspicious, he put a keylogger in the family computer in her phone and found some suspicious texts, emails, searches, etc. He hired a PI who followed my mom to the airport one day and struck up a conversation with her. My mom took the bait and ended up confessing everything to the PI under the impression it was some random stranger. I was introduced to my now stepdad a little under a year after they separated, but didn't meet any of his children or family until a few years later. Turns out he was having an affair as well, but was introduced to me by my brothers while he was still with his wife. I don't think any of my parents know that I know this, and it's not something I would ever bring up with them. I love all my parents and step-parents the same, and although they all did some crappy things, they all seem much happier now than they were when they were married to one another. When I was around 10 to 11, I went through a really rough patch emotionally. The substances I was getting for my ADHD started messing with me really bad, and that combined with regular prepubescent angst turned me into quite the little butthole. I started getting into a lot of fights in school and was generally an emotional wreck. I'd get so mad I couldn't express it and would instead just be a douche to everyone around me. One night I was on the couch with my eyes closed, basically being quiet for the first time in months, and I heard my mom say to my brother that raising me was just really hard and that sometimes she wished I was just someone else's problem. I know she was just tired and frustrated, but I've never forgotten that, and I've also never confronted her about it. My mom was cheating on my dad. That's a huge reason why they split. She very quickly remarried and popped out my brother. It wasn't until I was an adult that I did the math and realized she was pregnant by her second husband and still married to my father. My parents started going through a messy divorce when I was in middle school. It was a big mix of things which ended it. According to my dad, my mom was a secret alcoholic and would often pick my brother and I up from school while drunk. When my dad found out, we would randomly get picked up by a friend's parents and they would watch us while my dad made my mom sober up. My dad likes to exaggerate, so I have no idea how much she drank, or if she was just having a couple drinks with lunch. Either way, my mom doesn't know that I know she picked us up from school drunk. She's definitely not an alcoholic now. She keeps the booze front and center in the house now, and it always goes down at a reasonable rate. For my dad, when the divorce was final, he completely shut down. He became a recluse and wouldn't talk to anyone outside of work. He felt like he lost all of his friends in the divorce, but I could tell something else was bothering him. He never really recovered from the divorce and still only interacts with me, my brother, and his siblings. The divorce was finalized about 8 years ago. I was talking with my uncle, my dad's youngest brother, who roomed with him in college. Saying how worried I was about dad being lonely as he approaches 60, my uncle told me to never tell him I know. But apparently my dad was engaged to another woman when he was in college. They had been engaged for 6 months when my dad contracted gonorrhea from his fiancée. Turns out she had been cheating on him for years with the rest of the football team. I guess he never recovered from that, because it explains a lot of his controlling behavior and his distrust of anyone but a blood relative. I always want to tell him I know and that it's okay for him to talk to me about what happened. But I also don't want to betray my uncle's trust and ruin one of my dad's last good relationships. He recently found out his sister and mother were keeping a small secret from him and threatened to never speak to them again. He has a lot of trust issues and abhors being lied to. I found out my dad had been cheating on my mother for most of their marriage with a large number of different women over the years by following Wireshark tutorials on hack forums as a teenager. We're a middle-class suburban family and I have 3 siblings. My dad does all the work and my mom is a stay-at-home mom without a lot of payable skills. Telling my mom would ruin her and the family. They would either divorce or my mom would stay quiet to keep the quality of life for her children. Either one has no positives for me, my mother, or my siblings. My youngest brother is graduating high school soon and the rest of us have moved out. I have a very large amount of evidence compiled and I'm planning on anonymously giving it to her in a few months. I can't lie, I don't envy this man, the situation he's in or the decisions that he is making. I would not want anything to do with this. I mean, God, good Good luck with that. My aunt and uncle stopped talking to my parents when I was about 10 years old up until I was 18 and I reconnected with my cousin, their son. It hurt my parents that my mom's brother and his wife stopped talking to them for, as far as my parents were concerned, no reason. When me and my cousin became friends, our parents started talking again. Once I was talking to my cousin about it and he told me that his parents stopped talking to mine because my parents didn't buy big enough presents for my cousins, even though they were well off and my parents at the time were pretty broke. I've hated them ever since, though. I would never tell my parents this, as it would hurt their feelings, but F you, Steve, and F you, Lorraine, for being a pair of materialistic little douches. Also, Lorraine, my cousin told me that he walked in on you doing it with another guy, so you're also a cheating harlot. Have a nice life, buttholes. I went through the DirecTV history on my parents' TV. I wanted to find the name of a show my father kept telling me he loved so I could buy him DVD copies. Instead, I found a bunch of GGW PPVs. My father, the man who taught me how to illegally download media, buys his smut through pay-per-view on his cable provider. I was so embarrassed I could never bring myself to tell him. I'm terrified he might have to commit the Irish Catholic version of seppuku. My dad thinks my mom is insane. He regrets his entire relationship they had since they were teenagers. That's not it, though. My dad is even more messed up than my mom. He has serious emotional issues. Being in prison tamed him in the sense that he doesn't feel in the position to act on his impulses, but he has them still. I see it. My mom and dad had an abuser-victim codependent relationship made in hell. She says she stayed for the kids, but the whole reason why she had us in the first place is because she was trying to chain a man to look after her. She is incapable of taking care of herself to this day. My dad thinks I'm exactly like her. He also won't say that. He really doesn't like me, and I used to be scared he would do something to me, but he won't do anything now because, one, he's old and needs someone to take care of him. He knows his wife would leave him in a heartbeat. Contrary to my mom, she doesn't actually need him. Two, I am diagnosed mentally ill, and as far as he's concerned, I am totally crippled, which pretty much guarantees that I'll either stay by his side until he dies or will run to the first douche that can financially support me. They don't know that I know why they did all of that. It's pretty sad. They are both so afraid of being old and alone. We were apparently much better off than I knew when I was a kid. I never thought we were poor because we didn't go without the basics, but I was constantly told we couldn't afford things my mom just didn't want to spend the money on, so I was in the hand-me-downs from church members until high school. Wasn't allowed extracurriculars that had added costs, so no sports or Girl Scouts, that sort of thing. When I started working in high school at 14, my parents stopped paying for pretty much everything except my health and car insurance. I bought my own food, clothes, phone, etc. Never mind that my younger brother got to do anything he wanted and mom still pays for his car payments. Definitely not the end of the world, but it gave me a weird complex and I still have troubles budgeting and rationalizing extra purchases. Maybe some parents in the world are just fine with being really open about who their favorite kid is in extreme ways, or maybe your mom woke up on the wrong side of the bed the day you were born and they've just been internalizing that anger for your entire existence. I ain't got a clue, but you certainly have my sympathies. When I was 15, I was broke and looking around the house for spare change. I was home alone at the time. I looked in my parents' room and found a metal box with a padlock on it. My curiosity got the best of me and I looked around for the key. I found it and unlocked the box. There were letters and a journal inside, written by my mom. They were what she wrote in for therapy. It turns out my mother had 3 miscarriages before having me. I have an older brother and we're 7 years apart. I don't think he knows yet. I don't want to tell him, really. The letters made me cry my eyes out. I'm a mama's boy. All 3 of the miscarriages were going to be girls. She wanted a daughter named Mary Catherine. After she had me, she had to have surgery and was infertile afterwards. I always felt sorry for my mother since then. If I get married and have a daughter, I think I'm gonna name her Mary Catherine. I don't like being accusatory, but what were you going to do if that lockbox had money in it? I wanted to record a video for YouTube. I was covering songs and wanted to do a bit of a higher quality video this time. I knew my dad had a cool old camcorder somewhere, so I decided to poke around to find it. I find it under my parents' bed and think sarcastically, what if they had an SX tape on here, LOL. My parents are not the type, I thought, to do something like that. And it seems so, movie cliche. So my dumb butt rewinds the video and I'm confronted with my mother's woo-ha taking up the whole screen. Mentally scarred, I close the camcorder and shuffle back downstairs, trying my best to forget that horrendous mistake. They've got no idea I saw that. My dad was drunk once and told me my mom was boring in bed. This was a couple years after they divorced due to him finding another woman. Still, gee, thanks, Dad. I didn't need to know. My dad left his emails open one day, and with me being a snoopy 9-year-old, I had a look. Turns out when he visited his home country, he had an affair with his ex-girlfriend and was now having asexual conversations with her. I never told my mother, but 3 days later I was notified that they were getting a divorce. I know my mother is scamming money from a pension she should no longer be getting. She also took hundreds of pounds worth me and my brother were entitled to until we were 18. Both moved out at 17. And to top it off, she then took mine, not my brother's, only mine, bank fund my father put away for me before he died. They have a lovely car and home and excess money, and when I asked them for help, they never did. My brother asked and he got to move back home and got invited round for dinners. I know I was treated differently because I had a daughter and my stepdad hates kids. I found out my dad was a paranoid schizophrenic one night when I overheard my grandma praying for him. She thought I was asleep. I was like 16, but genuinely thought that his behavior was the most normal thing in the world since I had grown up with it. I cried myself to sleep that night. I did some research on it not long after since I didn't know too much about schizophrenia and was so traumatized when I realized how messed up he was. I don't know if it was by chance or because I started noticing things, but he became unbearably worse after, and me and him started fighting really badly. My mom finally told him to leave the house and they had a really messy divorce. I still feel guilty about fighting with him to this day and wonder if things would be better if I had never found out. He lives alone now and isn't allowed contact with any of us. It wasn't originally like that. My siblings used to go and visit him and he started electrocuting them so nobody could hear their thoughts. I feel so guilty when I think of him, living alone without any family around him. I've never told anyone that I found out through my grandma, but my mum still has never spoken to me about it. Now that I look back on things, I'm 24 now, I realize that she was being emotionally abused by him. It was just so normal to us, we never even realized. I know my mom used to do booger sugar and may have been to rehab. It's super weird because she and my dad became hardcore evangelicals before I was born, and my mom has never alluded to her previous lifestyle. It's kind of annoying because throughout my teen years, she acted like my curiosity about everything was just wrong, and she didn't understand why I would think to involve myself in it. She always acted better than me, and I know she would be really mad if she knew that I knew. Some people are just really weird and can't accept or let other people know that they at some point have made mistakes in their life. A laptop that was handed down from my dad to me and then to my sister had some disturbing court documents buried real deep about my real mom on it. It was regarding the custody battle, and there were numerous accounts of our mom trying to cause physical harm on us. We were too young to remember any of it, but one of them was about how my mom drove our Bronco into a lake with my sister in it. She wasn't even 2 at the time. I always wondered where that car went. Both my sister and I have just never said anything because we know how hard it was and how long it took for our dad to get custody, and the amount of crap he went through we'll probably never understand. My dad wasn't a virgin when he married my mom, even though she thinks he was. I also know he's cheated on her twice, at least. All of my siblings know as well, but none of us have told her. She's completely against divorce because of her religion, so it wouldn't make her leave. She'd just be miserable. Well, more miserable than she already is with him. Got a whole lot of infidelity going on here in this topic, and on the ones that I haven't read, a lot of hardcore you don't want to know fetishes. I'm the eldest, but only because of something that had happened to the one before me. My old aunt called me his name before correcting herself and telling me a bit. When she realized I actually didn't know, she shut up and wouldn't say another word. All I know is that my entire family knows, but they refuse to tell me anything. And they tell me to drop it because it was some traumatic event that my parents don't ever want to talk about. My dad apparently gave my uncle on my mum's side a black eye just for mentioning it, and Dad's pretty calm and cool-headed. I'm 19, my brother is 17, he doesn't know, and this will be a mystery until the day they die and I can dig out the information from someone else. I found love letters from my dad to my mum. I read 1 or 2 sentences. The one that sticks with me is he said he wanted to pour champagne all over her body. Then thought, holy crap, this is personal and gross, and put them back. The sad thing is they frickin' hate each other now. My father passed before I was born. Just yesterday, a buddy was telling me he was able to go back 6 generations using the Find a Grave website to find out his ancestors' names. I thought cool, as I've never met my father's father and didn't know he was still alive. I share his name. I find my father's page, but unfortunately there's no link for parents like my friend's relatives had. Bummer. I do notice, though, that there are several posts to his memorial page, so I go there. Apparently, my mom goes there at least monthly, sometimes more often, and posts how much she misses him and how she wishes he were still alive, etc. She has been with my stepfather, who for all purposes is my father, for many, many years. She lives in a different state and can rarely get to his actual grave. I never felt so sad for my mom as I did yesterday afternoon, but I'll never bring it up. I did call her, though, to chit-chat and gossip a bit, though. Check on your relatives regularly. Unless you've got beef with them, of course, in which case you do you. Not my parents, but my friend's parents. A long time ago, he had a few of us over for late-night games and pizza. My buddy Mike asked me to come into his parents' bedroom, which I thought was weird, but I'm 12, so who cares? He pulls open the bottom drawer of a large dresser, and he takes out what I thought was an elephant mask. Turns out it's an electronic elephant head with a thong attached, and there's a little crevice in the elephant's trunk where you can put your you-know-what, and when the mask is turned on, the trunk moves up and down as it makes elephant noises. Not that it really bothered me, but I never looked at his dad the same again. A huge part of why I left home was because of a call I heard from my mom. When I was in high school, my mom would pick me up after school from one of two places that sounded similar and started with the same letter. One day I went to the wrong place to be picked up, my grandmother's apartment instead of a shopping center. My grandma, who always loved causing fights in our family, took a call from my mom on speakerphone with me in the next room, where my mom called me a devil child, a worthless B-word, and said she never should have tried to get me back from child services after I was taken away because of her abuse. I knew she thought that about me, but it really helped me realize that all her talk about keeping fights in the nuclear family was so she could misrepresent my abuse to the extended family. I also realized that my mom must have done this fairly regularly if my grandma knew to have her on speakerphone instead of taking the call on a phone as normal. It pretty much solidified that my mom had no positive feelings for me and was only keeping me around to further abuse and manipulate. My dad lied to my family for 25 years about having fought in Vietnam. My whole life, he and my mother insisted that he had endured horrific traumas as a young man. However, after they got divorced, my mother mentioned this to his sister. His sister insisted that he had never been in combat and that he had spent his military career in Hawaii. She went so far as to have my father's ex-wife, who knew him at the time, call my mom and confirm that during that time, he was in Hawaii. Other bits and pieces began to make sense, and it became clear that he had lied to my mother about his experience in order to manipulate her. I've never told him that I know this because I'm worried he will lash out or maybe self-delete himself or something. At the end of the day, though, it is kind of a relief to know that he was never in any harm. Parents who dislike, hate, or resent your children. What happened? My son told his friends that I was abusing and bad-touching him because he wanted the attention. We were very close. Child services were called and then the police. He stuck to his story. I don't hate him. I never could. Sometimes I'm very angry, but mostly the betrayal gets me. I would never have believed he would do that. After several awful months, I think it's going to be all right legally, but the legal fees and stress has been overwhelming. Things will never be the same between us. He is a teenager, by the way. I remarried a wonderful man, my soulmate, about 2 years ago. I have 2 kids of my own, one son and one daughter. One is 14 and the other is 21. He has a daughter. She is almost 8. We met when his daughter was about 3.5. It's bad to say, but personality-wise, she hasn't changed very much for the last 4 years or so. I don't necessarily dislike my stepdaughter all the time. I have just had to distance myself a bit. She has no manners, no respect, she's spoiled and will whine until she gets her way. For example, I overheard her tell her great-grandmother to shut up. I also heard her tell her mom, "You are the most disgusting person I've ever met." When they scold her, she always tries to say she was just joking, and then she will start to cry and saying nobody wants me around and stuff like that. I know this is turning into a long post and I apologize. It just has been building up so long. I try my best with her and I had such high hopes for a close relationship with my stepdaughter, but I have found that our personalities clash, and I am used to having respectful kids. My husband tries his best to make her act right, but every time she goes back to her mom's or her grandparents, it gets worse. They give her everything she wants no matter what, and they allow her to talk to them anyway because she's still little and they may not have any more kids and grandkids. So I don't blame my husband. I feel bad for him because he's tired of having to be the bad guy all the time. Oh, and she likes to torment my cats. I tell her all the time to be nice to them, pet them gently, or better yet, leave them alone. But she likes to chase them, pour water on them, throw dirt at them, etc. She has plenty of toys in her room and also electronics and games, but she will cry and whine until my husband lets her use his laptop. She likes to watch toy commercials on YouTube and tell us what she wants for Christmas or her birthday. She makes these 5-page long lists of what she wants all the time. And then, if she doesn't get it, she whines that she never gets anything she wants. Her mother told us she picked out a $50 Halloween costume last week. She said that she told her that was way too expensive to pay when she is only going to wear it a few hours. Well, stepdaughter proceeds to cry and say she doesn't have anything and never gets anything and she needs new parents. One more thing that makes me mad. If adults are in the room trying to have a conversation, she will interrupt repeatedly until they stop talking and listen to her or watch her do some little something that could have waited. This child gets more attention than any of the other children, so I know it's not lack of attention that causes it. One more thing I thought of. About a year ago, I had my little granddaughter over at our house. She was about 9 months old at the time. Stepdaughter got caught trying to give the baby rocks. Well, we all got on her and tell her how dangerous it is to give the baby rocks. Babies can choke and get injured or even die. All that. Well, a few minutes later, I catch her putting the rocks in my grandbaby's pocket and I go mental. After telling her she could choke and die if she gets hold of a rock, she is putting them in the baby's pocket. Just one more example that there is something not right with this girl. When my wife was pregnant with our first and only child, we knew before birth that she was at high risk of Down syndrome because the gene was quite prevalent in both of our family histories. We both got tested and the doctor told us that our daughter had over 80% chance that she will be born with Down syndrome. Our marriage up to this point was happy and wonderful. We dated for 9 months before getting married and were more of partners than a couple. Everything we did, we decided together. We bought our own business, which didn't cause any fights, but rather we thrived because she was good at what I wasn't and vice versa. I was a messy kid before I met her and she helped me change my ways. She lacked hobbies before I met her and I helped her finding things she truly loved doing. We were happy. Very, very happy. The doctor told us that abortion was a viable option, but we needed to decide within a week or it would be too late. I knew right away that I was for the abortion, but didn't know how to bring it up. When we finally did sit down and talk, I brought all sorts of articles and books on kids with Down syndrome. I tried to show her rather than convince her of how hard our life would be if our child actually did have it. It was going to be hard for both of us to have a healthy child, let alone one that needed far more care. We were both busy and happy. She didn't want to take that option, and there was nothing I could really do to change her mind without really making her mad and ruining our relationship. So reluctantly, I went with it. As luck would have it, our daughter was born with translocation Down syndrome. Only 1% of all cases of Down syndrome are that, and it has a lot to do with hereditary conditions. I don't want to go into how bad our life became. I really can't even handle typing it out. My wife had to quit her job, which she adored. We had to move to a smaller house after a year and a half because of the medical bills. When I came home from work, she was too tired to talk or even see me and went to bed, and my entire 5 hours of free time every single day we spent caring for our daughter in some form or another. I didn't see my friends for 9 months, missed my cousin's wedding because we couldn't even think about traveling. Everything changed and everything changed for the worst. My wife and I only talked when we fought. Either she was too tired and that caused her anger, or I worked too much and didn't help her enough. To tell you my life went to absolute crap is an understatement because I can't even imagine how much extra stress my wife must have endured in those first couple of years. I don't hate my daughter, but I do resent the fact that we had her, even though I knew our life would be this way. I go to the park sometimes and sit and watch all the happy fathers play with their kids, watch them throw balls around or just run around the jungle gym. That's the life I wanted, that I dreamed of, but I will never have. My wife and I are still together because neither wants to burden the other by leaving. I ain't even going to take a side on this one. I think if you're going to have a child, child, you need to have absolute open honesty about your feelings of what's going to happen and all that stuff, but I'm not really going to touch this one too much. Not my child, but my husband's youngest son from his first marriage. I don't hate him. I care very much for him, but he is impossible to like. He's 12 and completely incapable of entertaining himself in any way. If he isn't pacified with television or some other electronic device, he's wandering the house being as loud and obnoxious as possible because bad attention is still attention. If you give him attention or try to find an activity to do together, he'll simply try to use that as a bargaining chip to get something else he wants later. He will do anything to play video games, and if you allow it, he will play all day without getting dressed or eating. He will also pretend to be sick to stay at home from school to play video games. He has a time limit but will lie and sneak to try and play longer. Taking away these things does no good. He'll continue to be an obnoxious, annoying little poo until he can play again. Sometimes I let him play so he will stop bothering everyone in the house. He's a chronic bedwetter, so he frequently smells like urine. He's got issues with pooing his pants sometimes too, and swears that he has no idea when or how it happens. He's been to numerous doctors and counselors who tell us to give him fiber. He's been instructed to change out the dirty clothes and put them in the wash, but he won't admit to it. Instead, he soils his pants. He'll often hide them somewhere until his disgusting cache is discovered and he gets in trouble. His punishment is usually a video game ban, but his behavior never changes. I love my husband more than anything, and his other kids and my kids are no issue at all, just the okay youngest. I feel like a monster. Oh yeah, some kids just do not have any mind for like cleanliness or anything. Like, God, hiding your soiled underwear and stuff like that in a cache, that sounds just ugh. This may be my deepest, darkest secret ever, and even now it almost brings me to tears to type this. One of my children with mental illnesses has been self-deletion adjacent and has survived numerous attempts. There have been times where I have had to sit in a chair in her room and watch her all night while she sleeps. Everything is locked up in our house. I keep cleaning supplies in my desk at work and bring them home only to clean and then take them back. Everything is a battle with her. It's embarrassing all the time we have an ambulance or cops come over. There is so much more that goes on. Anyway, I can remember one really, really awful period in our lives about a year ago where I honestly felt like she had not survived her attempt and that life for me and her siblings would be easier. There are a lot of days where I feel like I resent her inside. I just tell myself and try and remember that she is still the sweet girl I remember from her being a kid. What I resent is the person she is on meds and the depressed, self-harming person she is when not on meds. I don't dislike or hate my son, but I damn sure have some resentments every now and then. I have a 5-year-old with extreme behavioral and anger issues. They stem from a large dose of steroids required for a long period of time for a previous medical issue. I am not in the dark about these issues. I have a psychiatrist and counselor that we pay for him. However, no one is willing to do anything because he is 5. No diagnosis, barely medication. I have had to inpatient hospitalize my 5-year-old son twice. I have another child younger than him that was born around the same time that all of this started happening, and I just watched the difference between the two. I sometimes wish I had switched and had her first because the only reason I was trying again was so I could have a girl. I watch happy, functional families, and it makes me angry because we have been burdened by this. We can't travel, we can't go to parks or things of that nature because he targets other children, and I don't want to be that butthole mom on the playground that just lets my son beat the crap out of other kids. CPS is now involved for the 4th time in 2 years because at school he cracked a kid across the head with a rock because the school refuses to give him an IEP because he is so young. My husband and I have tried every parenting book, behavioral therapy method, strategy, etc. Nothing seems to work. Some days I just turn my phone on silent because I know it's going to be the school calling me saying he won't sit still in class and keeps running out of the classroom acting like a butt. But I have asked them repeatedly for an IEP and they refuse. Don't get me wrong, I love my son more than life itself, but it frickin' kills me to watch him have to live like this. He is so angry all the time, and sometimes I have to hold him in a full Nelson on the floor crying so that he won't hurt himself or anyone else. I wish other parents knew what this torture was like, the constant self-doubt and wondering where we went wrong. It is slowly killing my marriage, and I honestly wouldn't blame my husband if he did leave. In fact, I'd probably send our daughter with him just to make sure she was safe. So yes, I completely understand where some of these other parents in this thread are, and I don't judge anyone anymore when they say their kids have pushed them to the edge. I've been there and back so many times, I have the route memorized. Maybe it's hypocritical of me, but I've got ADHD, a thing that a lot of people for a long time would probably still think, oh, it's just a way to hand-wave bad behavior and all that. But something that I think is genuinely just an excuse to hand-wave bad behavior is ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder. I think that is a absolute crock. I made an account just for this question. I beyond resent my son. He's 7. He lies all the time. He never listens and does harmful things to others. His father took off before he was born. The states say they can't find him without an SSI or address for me to receive support. I've been living off the state for over 6 years. I work and go to uni full time. Every day is an argument and fight with this child. There are no fun times. There are no happy moments. He makes me miserable. All I want to do is graduate with my bachelor's in engineering. Every morning he makes me late for class because he refuses to listen to a single word. I've tried all the ways of disciplining or rewarding to get him on track. He's in special education for speech and math support. The doctor diagnosed him with ADHD last month. We are working through getting the right dose. But for now, he made me miss my calculus class again because he refused to get out of bed this morning. I don't think I love him anymore. I feel like he's sabotaging my life and chances of getting out of the welfare system. I'm miserable with him in my life. I'm not a parent, but I have had my oldest niece, 4, almost 5 years old, basically 24/7, barring the few times every month or so that her mum will take her home for a 12-hour period. Since she was a year and a half old, at this point I am the only stable parental figure she has ever really known. I do not hate or dislike her per se, but I do resent her. I resent all the attention she requires. She wants eyes focused on her all the time, and when she feels like she's not getting enough attention, she becomes a holy terror. I know part of her attention seeking is because her parents, who live right next door, pay little to no attention to her. I know a lot of her behavior stems from them basically ignoring her. She's very, very loud and likes to make nonsense animal noises all the time. She loves pretending to be a dinosaur. She loves singing. She loves running and playing just like any other 4-year-old, but she does not get the concept of quiet time or indoor voices. I suffer from migraines, and I have explained to her every time I have one that I need her to play quietly until my emergency medication starts working. So I tell her to sit quietly and watch a movie or draw for an hour or so. And as soon as I lay down, she's in my face, almost yelling for me to play with her or watch her do something, etc. She's also a bit of a brat too. When she doesn't get her way with something, she immediately runs to my grandmother, who gives her whatever she wants. Toys, sweets, whatever. When she does get in trouble, be it for screaming non-stop or destroying something, this happens at least 4 times a day, if not more, or being mean to or playing too rough with cats and dogs. Timeouts, spankings, sitting down, talking, explaining, rewards, none of it works. Any attention, good or bad, she wants it. When I tell her not to do something, the minute I'm out of sight, she's doing it. When I tell her not to pull on the dog's tail, she just pulls harder. When I tell her that she cannot smack the cat for not wanting to be pet or held by her, she chases the cat and corners him and then hits him when he scratches her. It doesn't help that I am literally the only one in the house that will stand up to my grandmother and put my foot down about her being disciplined. I am the only one that takes none of this little girl's bullcrap. Everyone else lets her get away with everything. Beyond all this, and as guilty as this makes me feel, I also resent her because during my last miscarriage, I still had to take care of her. I resent her mother for this too, but I resent her because it does not matter to her that even though she was told I was sick, or even when she was sat down and someone explained what was happening, she still wanted me to play with her and would not leave me alone for longer than 20 minutes. I resent her because for months after my miscarriage, she would still ask me when the baby would be here, and since it is now shortly after she was told the baby wouldn't be here, she is asking again. I understand that she's just a little kid, but it still hurts, and I feel guilty for that too. I resent her because even though I have no children of my own, I now have to live my life as if I do, which means now that I am working out of the house on 3rd shift, I have to sacrifice my sleep in order to care for her. Because her mother won't, I resent her much more lately because every time I try to discipline her or work with her, she's taken to screaming in my face, "You're not my mummy, I don't have to listen to you." She needs therapy for her anger, for her attention seeking, for the neglect from her parents. She just does not know how to cope, and I don't know how to help her. Don't get me wrong, I resent her mother much, much more than I do my niece. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I hate her mother for all of this, for screwing up her child, for ignoring her, for expecting me to care for her kid, while imposing rules for how she wants wants her child raised and tells her that she doesn't have to listen to me. I hate her mother with every fiber of my being. Every time I have to comfort her when she's crying for her mom because she misses her. I love my niece though. I love spending time with her and taking her to the park and making meals together and doing art with her. I love taking her to the museums and carnivals and movies. I love finding things to do with her that will teach her something or discover something new. I love that every day I find out something new about her as a person, and I love that we are so close. As much as I resent her for demanding my attention above everyone else's in the house, I mean, I live in a 3-bedroom house that 9 people reside in. There are plenty of people to play with. When I had my last miscarriage, I am also grateful for it. It would have been so easy to allow myself to wallow in the depression I fell into when it happened, but her excessive need for my attention made it to where I couldn't. All I could do was throw myself into taking care of her. My niece is intelligent and beautiful. She is strong and creative, and so very opinionated. I know that someday, if she gets some therapy, she will do great things. You know, I'm a strong believer in nuanced opinion, but some of these people writing about these kids just sound freaking bipolar. Oh, I hate them. Oh, I resent them. Oh, but I love them and they're beautiful and they have such a great soul. I get it. You can easily fall into disliking children very easily. You know, I get it. Parenting is the hardest thing, quite honestly. It's a huge freaking sacrifice, whether they are disabled, some of the other stories that we've heard, or like this, where it's just an attention-seeking kid. But my God, I just wish they wouldn't start with as much as they hate them at the start, and then it's oh, but it's all good, they're great and everything. I just don't believe it at that point. I love my children to death, and I would never go back if I could, but I absolutely feel it is normal to have a moment here or there where you're not too thrilled to be a parent. It completely changes everything about your life, even when your children are average, let alone have disabilities that make things more difficult. My children have no behavior problems, no problems at school, no health problems, nothing like that. But it's still difficult. I still have moments where I am resentful, not necessarily of them, but of the loss of what my life used to be. It would be nice to not be a parent every once in a while, and I don't mean send them to grandma's for the day, because even when they are gone, you still have that responsibility. This might be one of the absolute best answers here, but it's also extremely vague. I'll admit, for everything I just said previously, I do appreciate all of the, honesty that people kind of have with it. I live and breathe sports and activity. His mother was a personal trainer and I was a gym rat. Our first date was on a climbing wall. We got married in a canoe. We took trips all around the world. We lived life like a travel brochure. Our son was born with cerebral palsy and AMC, which basically means the joints in his arms and legs are locked up and will never move or develop. He will never walk or stand. He has limited use of his arms. We will never go fishing, canoeing, or hiking together. Everything that was so important to his mother and I's lives before him will never mean anything to him. In every way, he is so unlike me that I struggle to relate to him at all. When he was born, we both were in shock. He got RSV at 4 months and ended up in the PICU. He wasn't expected to survive. Honestly, his mother and I discussed it and quietly agreed that it would be best that way. We stopped visiting. He's 11 now. Mentally, he's above average. He gets A's in competitive private school. He competes in maths and spelling bees. I hated school. He is cheerful, kind to animals, and unfailingly polite. I was a sarcastic, rude little turd who butted heads with everyone. For some reason, he's still intent on impressing his parents, though I've rarely encouraged him. Despite all his wonderful traits, I still try to avoid seeing him because it makes me feel guilty, depressed, and disappointed. And I feel like crap about that because all his accomplishments tell me is how much I should love him. Anyone else would be thrilled, right? If not thrilled about the medical care, at least impressed with his achievements. I work long hours so that I can provide the best medical care he needs, the best education, anything material he could ever want, and so that I can stay away from him, because I know he knows. He tries so hard that sometimes I'm afraid it's all a front to make it easier for us to like him. Well, at least you can admit you're kind of a crap person. What made you go from meh to, oh crap, I need to see a doctor? I broke my butt. I slipped and fell down 2 steps of stairs. No big deal. My husband said I needed to fix my pants because it looked off from the back. I broke my sacrum bone above your tailbone, between S3 and S2, and it was sticking out. My doctor had to pop it in. There is nothing that can fix. I have a paralyzed tailbone. I can't feel it. I used to have agonizing leg pain and it would kill me to step sometimes. I chose to ignore it until I was scratching my balls one evening and discovered a lump. I was afraid I had cancer spreading and ran to the doctor. Found out I just had a weird growth on my nut that was not cancer. Leg still hurts though. 4 a.m. Drive heaving. Meh. 8 a.m. Kind of loopy. Have to catch my flight home. Noon. Get wheelchaired off the plane, escorted to connecting flight. 3 p.m. Landed in hometown, wheelchaired out to meet my girlfriend. 5 p.m. Shivering uncontrollably in a scalding hot shower. Abdomen pain so bad I couldn't even stand up straight. 5:30 p.m. Admitted to hospital, got scans and tests overnight. 7 a.m. Appendix surgery. Worst birthday so far. Worst birthday? I think the worst birthday I ever had was when I got hit in the legs with a baseball bat, like actually hit in the legs with a baseball bat when I was 10 years old, but at the same time, I also got a GameCube that day. So, maybe not that bad. I passed out at work. I was in my late 40s and a heavy smoker and not much of an exerciser. After a crap ton of tests, my doc told me I had a mini stroke and if I really didn't want to see 50, to just keep up my bad habits. The smoke I had on my way to see him was the last one I ever had, and it's been going that way for 22 years. If you throw up coffee grounds and don't remember eating coffee, you are bleeding internally and should seek help immediately. I was an athlete in college and one time I was at lift, and when I was moving the bar from the side holder on the squat rack, I hit myself in the side of the head, just hard enough. I didn't think much of it, finished my lift and went home. I didn't feel great for the next few days. A few days later, after competing in a track meet, I was at a team barbecue and had the worst headache. After I left, I decided to do some homework with my friend, sat down in front of my computer, fell asleep for about 20 minutes, and when I woke up, I looked at my screen and I was like, holy crap, I can't read. I had a concussion. I was with a friend at a public pond in Boston. She was going to teach me to kayak. We were just getting into the water, barefoot of course, and washing off the kayaks, and she was going to teach me to get into it. I slipped on a rock or something and there was a sharp pain in my foot. Not bad, just real sharp, real quick. I went, wait, I think I stepped on something. Let me look. Lifted my foot up and the water was blood red. My friend was all, we need to get a better look at that. Get to shallow water. I'm going to find a first aid kit or something. I kept insisting it was fine. Really, it barely hurt, but you know how blood in water is. It looks like way more than it actually is. I sat down once the water was shallow enough and put pressure on. Someone came over and was all like, are you okay? And my friend had found a couple dudes nearby who were like, I got a first aid kit in the car, probably have some butterfly bandages in there. Let's see how bad it is. I brought up my foot out of the water and you could see the layers of skin and fatty tissue kind of flopping about. All four of the folks around me simultaneously went, ew, or oh my god, or something of the sort. We wrapped a sock around it, quickest thing we could find. Helpful dudes said they'd take care of the kayaks and my friend zipped me to the ER. I seriously did not think it was hurt that bad at all. It was very non-painful when it happened. The recovery was a nightmare, but when it happened, it didn't feel any worse than a small cut or something. In the ER, I'm sitting there with this sock around my foot and the doctor comes in with 3 students following along behind him. They were in coats, he wasn't. He was all, okay, let's have a look. And he unwraps the soaking wet sock from my foot, not water, and I sprayed blood all over him. Even as he backed away, we're talking about a 5-foot arching spray of blood pumping with my heartbeat. It was kind of awesome, actually. Yep, severed an artery. The doc was like, well, that's what I get for not wearing my coat. I'll send you a dry cleaning bill. As the 3 students and him were leaving, one says to me, seriously excited, we've never seen arterial bleeding before. Thanks. You're welcome. Medical students so weird. Bless them. When I was a kid, I used to like taking nice long dumps while playing on my Game Boy. I once stayed on too long. It felt weird. It felt like I was halfway through pooping out a giant turd, which makes you want to push, right? Yeah, bad idea. Apparently, your butt can fold itself inside out like a sock. I thought it was a piece of crap I could grab and pull out, so I wadded up a bunch of TP and tried to pull it out, but it hurt, so I started to panic. Screamed for my parents, went to the ER, sat in the ER waiting room with my guts inside out for a while, and when I finally got in, the doc had me lay down on my stomach. He had no idea what the heck to do. He said he might massage it back in. That phrase is stuck in my head for the rest of my life, and I just remember it folding back in. It was so uncomfortable and cold. Never happened again. It's called a prolapse, and it's awful. That was really hard not to laugh all the way through, but yeah, there's a reason why you shouldn't stay on the toilet too long. One day I went from, my hearing is muffled in one ear, to, now I'm deaf in one ear, to, the room is spinning and I can't stop vomiting. Went to the ER real fast at that point. Now the room has stopped spinning, but I never did get that hearing back. Leg pain went from a nuisance to not being able to stand up. Turns out it was stage 3 cancer. If I had waited another week, I would probably not be around anymore. My doctors did several different types of scans on me. They ended up finding a tumor the size of a grapefruit on the base of my spine. A few days later, they removed it, and I further had 6 rounds of inpatient chemo and a further 6 weeks of radiation treatment. The cancer was called schwannoma neurofibromatocytoma, and yes, I still have my leg. It was basically the same situation as the movie 50-50. Hey, my ankle looks a little swollen. 5 minutes later. Hey, everything under my knee turned into a purple elephant foot. Also, my pee is blood. Kidney failure. Not even once. Didn't have a period for a couple months, more like 6 months to be honest, and thought nothing of it because, well, didn't have to bleed for a week. Yay! Until I had cramps that made me crawl through the house and almost rip my mom's shirt while crying asking to be taken to the hospital. It lasted a couple of hours, but it had to happen twice for my mom to take me to the OBGYN. I went, did the exams, and she said it's totally normal. I had an ongoing period from the end of December to February, but in the last month I had normal periods, so yay! Throw away because TMI and I don't want to think about this after I post. A couple years ago, I noticed that peeing was starting to hurt. I assumed it was a UTI since I've actually had one before when I was much younger, and it felt similar. I heard that a good way to cure or treat a UTI was to drink a metric ton of water so you kind of pee away the germs, and that's what I did. A few days later, I couldn't pee at all, like nothing would come out. Even though I definitely had urine in my body, a panic attack or two later, I finally told my mom so she could take me to the ER. I was underage at the time and couldn't drive, and I was also in so much pain, I probably wouldn't have been able to drive even if I knew how. Did you know that catheters suck? Because catheters suck. I went through a lot of physical and psychologically uncomfortable tests, including an ultrasound because one of the possible causes was a cyst on my ovaries. We found nothing, like no causes at all. We had no idea what was going on. My urethra just decided it didn't want to pee anymore and clamped up, causing immense pain whenever something needed to pass through. Like a ton of water I drank under the impression that it was a UTI. Thankfully, there's a medication specifically for that sort of situation. It numbs up the urethra just enough that I could pee. That combined with the catheter probably saved my life. I wasn't anywhere near exploding bladder status yet, but I damn well could have been. Eventually, after a few days of taking the medication, I was fine and I've never had that happen since. Kind of an anticlimactic end to be honest, but it did go from mad to, oh, balls, I need to go to a hospital in the matter of a day or two. In college, just as we were about to start the summer vacation, we had a scheduled week to pick up our grades. This was before electronic grading and all this fancy stuff. We still rolled with report cards. I wasn't feeling too well. I barely could walk and had a head-splitting migraine. I was sure that I was at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of temperature and was starting to feel chills, all the flu-like symptoms at the start of the summer. I trotted through the day at uni, 6 hours going from class to class, building to building to pick up my grades. On the drive home, I was with my dorm mate who lives in the same hometown as me. We were driving with a family member, and I knew whatever was happening to me was serious as my vision was clouding, and I felt like I was being boiled from the inside. My mom's hospital was nearby and I knew the director personally. I asked the driver to pull over and take me there. By the time we were at the waiting area, I barely could walk and my dorm mates were trying to hold my head. I insisted she go home and ask my family members to fetch my mom. I used the excuse if I had the flu, I didn't want them to be sick. I called my mom who was upset that I was faking sickness. I always was overly dramatic, but this really felt like death. She was rambling on the phone that I was pulling unnecessary stunts and I kept saying, if you want to yell at me, do it here, and hung up the phone. I went up to the director's office who immediately saw something was wrong. Everything from this point was a blur. I spent 2 hours in the ER, had 2 IVs, and at some point was with a breathing tube. By the time my mom came, she saw me in the ER with all these machines and tubes hooked up, and I ended up being in the hospital for a week. I didn't fully wake up till almost 2 days later. I would come in and out of consciousness, but the bad times where I would have seizure-like coughing fits that wouldn't let me breathe and back goes the breathing tube. Diagnosis: walking pneumonia with bronchitis infection. I must have had it days before. After I recovered from a slight fever and ignored me coughing up a little blood, the event weakened my already bad lungs so bad it took me a long while to recover. Developed epilepsy in my 20s and couldn't figure out what's been triggering them. A year and a half later in unstable medicine, I'm going on 3 months without a grand mal seizure. I've never had or seen a seizure in real life, but I imagine that is awful to have that regularly. I kept my contacts in for too long, had a headache, and decided to sleep it off. Thankfully, I took out my contacts because when I woke up, it seriously felt like I was hitting the skull with a baseball bat. Any amount of light hurt so frickin' bad. Rushed to the ICU where they looked at my eye and said I had a corneal ulcer. So now, I have a very small scar on my eye. It doesn't affect my vision, but I totally learned from sleeping with my contacts in. I had recurring back pain for a couple of years. It would be really bad for a couple of days, then it would go away for a few months. Then, last year, it came back and didn't go away. I thought it was some kind of musculoskeletal problem and tried to push through it. When I couldn't breathe or walk without assistance, I went to the ER. Both of my lungs were collapsing with 800 mils of fluid on each one, plus some around my heart. Doctors were surprised I was still alive. Bent down to pick up mail I had placed on my stairs, stood up too quickly and got lightheaded, and an hour and a half later I still didn't feel right. Lightheaded, racing heart, shortness of breath, etc. My dad had gone through heart issues less than a year before, and I thought my mind was convincing myself that I was in arterial fibrillation because he had lots of episodes of it, and I knew a thing or two about it. Go to the ER? Yep, a fib. Several hours later, and 2 ineffective chemical cardioversions later, I got an electrical cardioversion defibrillation. They knocked me out, did some cardioversions, and I came around in less than 4 minutes. Woke up feeling like everything was normal again. They kept getting stronger, so I kept popping with Gravel, Pepto, and Advil. One morning I woke up with searing headache pain and reached for my extra strength liquid Advil, and the bottle was empty. I polished off the whole bottle in less than a week. That's when I realized it was really serious. Turns out it was a brain tumor. Luckily, surgery fixed me up. When I googled what does throat cancer look like, and a bunch of pictures similar to the fleshy lump in the back of my throat came up. About to sleep and my tooth is feeling weird. Hurts a little, but nothing I can't sleep through. I wake up from a nightmare in a deep sweat and my jaw is exploding with pain. I stagger out of bed, somewhat delirious, and collapse on my kitchen floor in pure, unadulterated agony. I've had fingers crushed, bones broken, and skin badly burned before, but nothing has ever come close to how bad toothache hurts. My frickin' God, it was the worst time of my entire life. I had a hot pulp, and my dentist said it was the worst they'd ever seen. Had to have an emergency root canal. Look after your teeth. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm the type of guy that's like, no, I refuse to take an ibuprofen, a painkiller, or what have you if I'm in pain to some degree. It has to be really serious, but consistently, if I have an abscess or something or some kind of tooth pain, then I am just 100% down. Give me the painkillers, please. Level went from, oh damn, this is bad, but I can basically keep it together, to I can no longer give even the slightest appearance that I am okay. That and the EMT buddies I was hanging out with said they were legitimately concerned that I might be dying. Turned out it was a kidney stone. I had been in a minor car accident earlier in the day and hadn't gone to the hospital, so they were concerned that there was internal bleeding or something, and I was going to drop dead from it in front of them. One time I was at work and I felt a touch queasy. No big deal, I'll just sit down and try to eat something. That'll set me right. Nope. I straight fell out of my chair and started flopping around on the floor like a fish. Had a seizure for no reason at all, or none that the doctor could find. Had a killer migraine for weeks and was constantly dizzy, and I doubt I'll ever know why it happened. I had an annoying pain on the right side of my back that moved to the right side under my rib. I knew it was gas. The next morning it was still there. I laid down to move the gas. That made it worse. I started having horrible pain in the middle of my chest. Thought I was having a heart attack, vomiting, etc. There was a point where I thought I was going to pass out because I couldn't take the pain anymore. A few days later, I was talking to my husband and decided to look up the symptoms because I was still a little sore. I went to the doctor and had to go to the hospital for an ultrasound. I had a bad gallbladder attack. Kinda gross, but my first bleeding UTI, I went from, I'll drink lots of cranberry juice to, oh no! I love cranberry juice, but you can't drink too much of it because it makes you spit all viscousy and horrible. I had rosacea. After around 5 years, I grew out of it. at around the same time as I stopped eating dairy. Then I decided I really missed cheese. The rosacea came back, but all over my whole face and neck, along with a strange, intense itchiness that I'd never experienced, and hives. Had my "oh crap, I need to see a doctor" moment real goddamn quick. In December of 2007, I had a really bad calf strain. Got so bad I could barely put weight on it. I had a deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot in a deep vein in my leg, it turned out. My left leg started to lose feeling, first from at the toes and worked its way up over the course of a couple days. There was no pain, just tingling. No pain, no doctor, right? That's what I thought until I tried to stand up and my leg just buckled. Time to get that checked. Went to the ER, had an MRI, had a ruptured disc that, and I quote, obliterated my spinal cord, and I was hours away from permanent nerve damage or paralysis. Had surgery immediately, all is well now. Low-key, I'm so worried this topic is going to turn me into a hypochondriac. I just know that when I'm done reading this, the slightest pain in my body is just going to set off alarm bells. I was sore in my pelvis, think between my left leg and the base of my wiener. Thought I must have rammed it into the bag hooks while working behind the register. It didn't get better though, and I thought I must have kept running into it while I wasn't looking. I got to the point where I couldn't tie my shoes, run, or wear seatbelts. It also looked like a frickin' golf ball was under my skin. I was driving a Del Sol at the time, which was not an ergonomic masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. It frickin' killed having to sit in that position. Working a clutch and wearing a seatbelt made it worse. I went to the doctor. Eventually, they found out I had a really agitated lymph node that couldn't be relieved. I had recently found out I was PAWS, and that can happen sometimes, even when the numbers look good. I needed surgery to remove it. Turns out it was the size of a robin's egg, which is apparently big for a lymph node. All the rest was swelling. No cancer, no nothing. It was just an agitated lymph node. I've been sick with mono for 2 weeks. I didn't go to the doctor or suspect anything was wrong until I woke up one day and I was jaundiced like crazy. Turned out the monovirus was attacking my liver and affecting enzyme production, making me throw up frequently as well. Got stung by a bee while riding a motorcycle on my way to work. My dad is very allergic and I'm a bit allergic myself, but only very rarely have serious reactions to it. Meh. Half an hour later at work, my bicep was uncharacteristically swole, like Arnie, and the veins in my arm were bright, inflamed, and red. Yep. Supervisor told me to get gone. I tried to find a doctor in the box that wouldn't take all of my savings, and after a bit of driving around with this ridiculous bee-stung arm, got treated. Fun times. I used to fall asleep in class ever since I can remember. Just thought, hey, school is boring. Fast forward, I'm 21 years old and still falling asleep in classes. Anytime I have to drive anywhere over an hour long, I'd have to pull over to take naps. Would fall asleep at work daily, and just felt extremely exhausted 24/7. I just thought, hey, this must be what it's like to be an adult. Tired all the time and just wanting to sleep. Bet it'll only get worse from here. Then one day, I fell asleep mid-sentence talking to my boss. I played it off to him like I was sick and just passed out for a moment. Went to the doctors and did some sleep studies. Turns out, I have narcolepsy. I woke up for work on a Friday morning with a tickle in my throat. After work, I traveled to Boston for a pre-planned weekend trip, my throat and tonsils swelling more the entire time. I get home on Sunday not being able to swallow my own saliva without almost crying. I did cry at times. Monday morning, there's a massive blizzard and everything is closed except a walk-in clinic. I forced my significant other to help me drive through 24 plus inches of snow because it was really unbearable. The doctor there said I had the worst tonsils he's seen in years, and that if it keeps swelling, I should go to the ER. Turns out I had a really bad case of tonsillitis due to undiagnosed mono. Vertigo. Was getting my daughter ready for school when suddenly it felt like I drank a gallon of moonshine and couldn't even stand up. Room spinning, the works. Meclizine is life now. Also, I can't ride simulators or use VR anymore. That kinda sucks. I got earaches a lot. Most of the time, I'm meh about it. Take some Tylenol and go about my life. One time in particular, though, it moved into an ear infection in under 8 hours. I've had ear infections before, but nothing compared to the pain I was feeling that evening. I paced around the room in tears for about 2 hours before giving up and going to urgent care, where I got medication for my ear along with pain medication. I'll never forget the exact moment that the pain medicine kicked in. It was absolute bliss. One night in college, I went to an exceptionally crazy forest party, drank way too much and ended up blacking out. I was obviously extremely hungover and in a lot of pain, so I went home, drank a bunch of water, and slept for a few hours. When I woke up, I had super intense pains in my abdomen, and I chalked it up to it being from my drinking. Fast forward 2 days later, and I'm in too much pain to leave my apartment. Every time I move, it's painful. After 3 days of this, and I go to the campus health center, they ran some tests but couldn't find anything wrong, but told me to go to the ER. When I go to the ER, they have no clue and give me fluids and send me home. I return in about an hour since the pain is so terrible. They do a colonoscopy and find out I have huge kidney stones. Took me another week with pain meds and prostate meds, I'm female by the way, to pass them. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.